Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Whining On. That's exactly that. Welcome to Whining On, everyone. Thank you for joining. Today, I have a living legend, Mr. Rob Ballard. Rob, please tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
I think you're playing fast and loose with the definition of the word legend there, really. I'm 18 years a Covent Garden street performer. I was originally in a double act, which was mostly sword fighting double act, and then another sword fighting double act. Most of my show as a solo has been a knife throwing comedy act. I was the founder member of the committee for the original SPA. I wrote the constitution of the SPA with a guy called Eddie Izzard. And and I retired probably about 10 years ago, 12 years ago or so, 12, 15 years ago, I'm saying.
Okay. And how would you describe your act, just briefly, if you had to give it a kind of a sentence description?
A pitch. It's a comedy knife throwing show using a member of the audience to simulate throwing knives at them. I can actually throw knives. The member of the audience watches me throw the knives, and then I put them in, put a blindfold on, and then we fake it.
Okay, so you basically play a trick on the audience, or on the volunteer, I should say.
Play a trick solely on the volunteer. The whole audience can see it. They go, you get 3-1 Bathsheba. I have no idea where that phrase comes from. Throw the knife, pretend to throw the knife. Another member of the audience sticks the knife in right next to the guy's head. And then you lift the blindfold, and the audience goes absolutely wild. They love it because here is them playing a trick on the guy. And I always used a guy. We grew up in the era of the sexism and anti-racism, anti-sexism, anti-racism. So we just couldn't bear the idea of, the traditional woman having knives thrown at her, the knife thrower's assistant. Yeah. So we always use guy, and from sheer practice, middle-aged guys, bald head with beards were the ones who were great, young guys, but shit. Sort of thing. Middle-aged guys, bald head with beards, really didn't mind. They kind of, you'd lift the blindfold, they'd look at the knife and go, fucking hell. And that was the reaction you wanted.
Well, I like the idea you pervert the medium as well. I find that a really interesting bit of process. But I hope we'll get into that more later on when we talk about your method, your progression. Just to start off, but why choose a life like this? Why, as a young person, do you think I'm going to do this?
The origins of it came from myself and 4 other students were driven by Eddie Izzard to go and do the Edinburgh Fringe. Absolutely, he was doing it whether we were going or not, and we would be bastards if we, let him down. So we went, and we were doing a sketch show on the Edinburgh Fringe. One of the things we'd go and see on the Wireworks playground before they built a great big building on it was an open playground at the back of the Fringe ticket office, and on there was playing a group. 2 groups. One was Pookie Snackenberger, who, is one of the holy trinity of street performing, quite frankly. JJ Waller, Tim Batt, and Pookie Snackenberger are almost, I think, like some of the first kind of modern street performing guys that weren't just the old sort of, I'm going to get in chains, I'm going to escape, I'm going to tear a telephone book in half. They were young guys at the time, and they were there before I was. I only latterly saw the very end where I saw Tim Batt performing. People will have already referred to Tim Batt before. And Pookie Snackenberger was a great big street band, led by Luke Creswell and a lot of the...
Can I just ask...
Yeah.
Before we go into these guys and into Edinburgh and stuff, and I really want to talk about these guys because it's super interesting, the stuff these guys done and some of the stuff that people have gone through after.
Yeah.
But were you as a child, were you into theatre? Was it something that it was in your bones from a young person? from a kid? Did you have family who made you recite Shakespeare?
No, I had 4 years of therapy, which I actually realized the reason why there is a psychotic urge to get in front of people and get them to love me, which is a bit pathetic, really. But the stuff that you grow up with from the first 5 years of childhood affects you. I was the third boy, followed by my sister, who came along pretty soon afterwards, within sort of, pretty much a year after I was, or so, a bit longer after I was born. So I was a slightly extraneous child, frankly. She had her 2 boys, then she wanted a little girl, and she got another boy, and then she got her little girl, and famously, I was always told that I was a lovely child. You could just put him in the playpen, leave him for hours. Now, frankly, most people would regard that as neglect. And essentially, I think what got used to small play. No, of course that was parenting in those days. You just give them a box of buttons with a razor blade in. It's fine. They love to play with those razor blades. Feed them on Quality Street. That'll build up good health for them. So to some degree, a sort of psychosis in me would be to entertain or to just play by myself and get very used to playing by myself. And, for the vast majority of my adult life, I've been a playwright, and there is no greater kind of what in childhood they refer to as small play, i.e. you're playing with little fingers going, hello, my name's John, your name's Callum. And playwriting is just that writ large with a commercial application, so to speak. If you think of a playwright, he is just in his head and writing down moving characters around.
And so I get this feeling then that you're drawing a parallel, just by adjacency maybe as well, that being a child who was either on his own a lot of the time and left to entertain himself, and at the same time being someone who felt like they needed to get attention and draw attention. Yeah. When you're out and about, has engaged you to have this form of fantasy and ability to play in one's mind when one's alone and be able to bring those things out with other people. Yes, a sort of semi-survival mechanism and a semi sort of where you keep yourself entertained. You are self-contained. You are. Did this push you into the theatre department of the high school then? No, not. I mean, I sporadically did things, and I found that, I was always a bit sort of struck. I was brought up a Catholic, and Catholicism is quite interesting. It's a very show. They ain't fucking around in Catholicism. It's kind of, we've got costumes, we've got smoke, we've got big buildings, we all sit there singing dreadful songs, we've got and you've got a whole priest in the regalia and all this, and we drink the blood of Christ and eat his body, and it's all kind of this it's a bit nuts. In fact it's completely fucking nuts, that Catholic religion, as we know. There's a penchant for the dramatic. Attention to dramatic. And I was always struck by the one fundamental bloody thing is that actually the performers are crap. The actual central actor, the priest, doesn't know his lines. I mean, the Pope, God rest his little soul, how many times has he said that mass and he still doesn't bloody know his lines? Now, I have performed really long plays and I'm terrible at learning lines, but I have actually ultimately learned 2 solid hours of lines where I'm never off stage, I'm talking to people. Now, it didn't take me that long. It was, what I was always struck in the Catholic Church, it was plain bad theatre. It was boring. Dull as shit. And, but for you learning your lines, because, you said it was hard for you to learn lines. Yeah. You learn them through perseverance. Is that how you got to that point? You do. Every performer, an actor will have a specific, we all have facility. I actually am really good at hearing things and repeating them.
If I listen to somebody's stand-up routine, I'm pretty, I'm not far off knowing their bloody routine, having heard it once. Reading them, I'm shit. So what I discovered, and it took me a long time, is that actually what I need to do is I record my lines and then I listen to the damn things. I've got what people refer to as an aural memory, i.e. that I remember things I hear. I don't necessarily remember things I read or see. It doesn't help. It's a sort of, it's just a facility that, I can hear things and I will repeat them.
It makes complete sense to me. I mean, I feel like I've experienced similar things like that. I'm terrible at remembering text, but I'm quite good at remembering conversation. I do definitely think you get people that have visual memories, audible memories,
sure.
Kind of pure analytical informational memory that will just draw points of information, but not necessarily the interconnecting points of it. So you're in high school. You're at the church.
Yeah.
You're watching the poor play being played out in front of you.
I always had the impression I could, it would be better if you did it like this, which ironically is almost exactly what a theatre director does, which, has always been the sort of, that's been the above the line profession, so to speak, being a theatre writer, theatre director. The below the line became the street performing, whereby each weekend I would go to Covent Garden. I would earn enough money for, most people's reasonable wage, and then. But this
is a long way away, Rob. At the moment, it's a long way away. We're still with you as a child. At school.
Sorry,
did you go to university? Did you study performing arts before you got there?
No, I was chiefly interested in music, and because they were in the house, there was a drum kit, and I am actually a pretty proficient drummer, professional standard drummer, and so I was drawn to performance, to the notion of being in front of people, mostly through music. So by the time I got to university, I did theatrical things in school because there weren't many of them, but I did whatever there was, and I tended to write them, it was sketchy sort of stuff, and you'd be writing sketches and parodying the teachers and this sort of thing. So I did that. And then when I got to university and was just about starting doing bands before leaving Birmingham, I'm originally from Birmingham, which, hang on a minute, all membership cards must be shared. I should actually sound like this. Pepe and I, technically speaking, have got the same accents. We've all got a Brummie accent, really. And just out of sheer utter weakness of my personality, I just blend in with whoever I am talking to. So if you and I talk long enough, I will actually sound remarkably like you after a while.
Well, I do a similar thing. I come from quite close to you. I come from north, from Staffs, from a place called Rudgley, which I now pronounce I pronounce it Rugeley now. Yeah, Rugeley. But it's southern dialect.
Well, it's like Dudley, which is the homeland of Lenny Henry, and it's Dudley, and it is undoubtedly spelled Dudley, but in Birmingham it's Dudley. And all right, that's okay. But can I just point out, and this is a bit of a party piece of mine, that not only did this accent exist in Birmingham, but Stratford-upon-Avon is only 25 miles away. So technically speaking, Shakespeare would have sounded to be or not to be. That's the question. Whether it's nobody in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or there's the rub. That's actually what he would have sounded like.
There you go.
Just what you wanted.
Yeah. What did you study in uni then?
I originally went up to study politics at Sheffield University.
Okay.
And in fact,
Why politics?
I kind of liked it. I had a very inspirational teacher who was teaching us politics and economics. And in actual fact, he ended up at teaching at Cambridge, as a Don. He'd done Exeter and Cambridge. And I think this was him doing his social conscience bit, where he was teaching Catholic Catholic sixth form students in Birmingham. I'm pretty sure that's what honestly, you do get teachers who just go, I'm going in there and I'm going to teach in shitholes, and I'm actually going to give them the chance to get out. I mean, I've done teaching myself, and it is, I don't know, it is wonderful, and it is also slightly mad sometimes, teaching. But so very inspirational teacher, got me into politics. He also got me into theatre. Because he would take us to see theatre trips and things. So the classic thing, took us down to London. We went to the House of Parliament, had a look around the House of Parliament, and then he took us to see a Tom Stoppard play in the evening. And to be honest, Tom Stoppard is the kind of watching a play of his is what made me go, I want to do that. It can't be that clever. And then when I checked, and it was that clever, you just go, holy fuck, that is what I want to do. So I really I'd gone to, there was always a thing about going to the theatre in my family, not because we were a middle class family, but because there was an uncle who had seats every week at the Birmingham Alexander Theatre. And every Tuesday there were always these seats. Now, if it was something they wanted to go and see, i.e. with somebody in, so they'd use them. If nobody wanted to go and see it, the last person would be Granny, and Granny needed someone to go with her. So that would be me. I would be sent along with Granny, and I would be going to see, the doily cart people doing the gondoliers, which to this day I now like. And I always remember going to see a play.
Can you explain what this is? What the gondoliers is?
Oh, it's Gilbert and Sullivan. It's one of the. It's.
I mean, I'm a cultural idiot, so you'll have to explain.
All right, okay. Gilbert and Sullivan essentially were the Andrew Lloyd Webber and Cameron Mackintosh rolled together of their day. They had completely hit musicals. They are very witty. They're very funny. If you want to know the origins of frat student humor, is Gilbert and Sullivan. They really are, parody and piss take, and they write really good tunes. Honestly, if you listen to a load of Gilbert and Sullivan, you'd go, I know that one. Oh, I know that one. Oh, I know that. And they just wrote musical after musical after musical after musical, and they were massively successful and hit, sort of thing. And I don't know, it's not actually in any way my sort of era at all. It's Victorian, Edwardian era.
The young you with Granny enjoyed this, I assume.
I would go to,
It wasn't a drudgery.
Well, no, I don't know why I just used to go, I was the person that they sent with Granny to go and see it. And oddly enough, it was inspirational for exactly the other reason. I always remember going to see a play called Worm's Eye View, which is about billets in the Second World War, i.e. people put into people's officers and soldiers who were put into people's houses during the Second World War. And it starred with inverted commas around the word starred, a character from a TV sitcom called On the Buses. Not the lead character, but one of the subsidiary characters. And it was so inexorably shit that I sat there going, and yet this was a successful play in its day, and this was having something of a revival. And I thought, I can do better than that. And I started writing, going, I can do better than that. And oddly enough, when you see something brilliant, a really good piece of theatre, you go, you know what, I really can't do that. That's way more than I can ever think of. When you see something a bit shit and you can start pulling it apart, you can go, oh, I can do better than that. When you see, like Covent Garden, one of the first shows I ever saw on Covent Garden was Chris and Alex, which were a juggling double act. Alex Dandridge, you've interviewed, and a guy called Chris, who I can't remember, who was the sort of senior partner at the time. But Alex Dandridge essentially was Billy the Kid of juggling. He was just fucking brilliant at juggling. Young kind of nutball kid, but really good at juggling. And they had an act.
Oh, wow. So I guess it's just us there again. So I'm going to call Rob now and just double check. Hopefully we'll get him back in a second. I'm going to take this time, first of all, to say hello, everyone. Nice to see you all. I'd like to say thank you to everyone who helped. The guys who helped recently, put into the PayPal, put into the Patreon. So many of you did. Really genuinely helped. Phone bills got paid. The internet buddy service that they're using now has got paid. We'll put money aside and hopefully looking to invest in cameras and stuff in the future. Hopefully. Chris Adams was the guy who was talking about. Thank you very much, Melvin. So I'm going to rim Rob now, and I'd like to keep focused on you and keep you entertained, but I'd also hopefully like to get him back on. Hi. Hey, how you doing? So are you logging back in now?
Yeah, unfortunately, but I'm not very confused. Stuff with Bill Microsoft, she has Apple Macs.
So you're trying to navigate the Mac.
I have no idea.
Okay, everyone. So Rob's on Mac at the moment when he's a PC user, which I can empathise, and he's trying to navigate his way around. So it might take a couple of moments to be back in, but hopefully he is on the way in now. Rob, I'm going to put the phone down on you now, and hopefully I'll see you in 2 seconds, buddy. So one of the things I'd like to talk about with Rob, that I'm particularly asking the light on me, I'm a little too, I look like I'm in the witness protection program then. So one of the things I'm really interested to talk to Rob about that I chatted with him a few days about is that he and Eddie Izzard, you might have recognised that name, together with the people who helped form the SPA in the way it is. And the SPA is the Street Performers Association, the Covent Garden Street Performers Association. And I think that's really been a model for trying to set up other associations around other places. Not always been followed. I think to this day, it's probably the freest pitch in the world, the most accessible pitch in the world for anyone to go and work, at least for now. If you look at pitches all over the world, councils leverage power over you, want a license from you, want a risk assessment from you, which isn't a terrible thing to have to do. They want to control the content. If somebody complains and unhappy with what you're doing, just because they personally are offended by what you're doing, they don't like the content of what you're doing, you could get shut down easily in a licensed place. Whereas in Covent Garden, we have a reasonable amount of artistic integrity. And I think that artistic integrity is created because the pitch is managed by the performers. And the performers aren't idiots. They're not arseholes. No one's going to sit around and allow someone to be racist or offensive or violent or horrible. But what we do know is that when things are purposely viewed in the wrong way, if someone tells a joke that obviously isn't racist, obviously isn't mean, but someone's decided to complain, generally speaking, with a council, the complaint is enough to cause problems, aggravation, and possibly refusal of access for somebody. But with the SPA and with performers, we know the ground. We've worked it for 20 years. We understand what's happening there. We've got power in the SPA, and we've had that for maybe, how long ago is it we're talking now? We're talking 1985. In 1985, I think around about that time is when Eddie and Rob set this up, with Melvin and a few other people. That's 25 years. So for 25 years, the performers have had control and management over their own space. That's pretty amazing. They've voted on all the choices they've made. So one person, one vote. That's an incredible thing. That doesn't really exist in any other workplace anywhere in the world, as far as I'm aware at the moment, at least for street performers. Every other pitch is run in a slightly different way. When you go to Covent Garden, when you join Covent Garden, the first day you're in Covent Garden, you have an equal say to every single other person there. And I think that's a magical thing. And we'll find out later on in the video what happened with that. So Rob will be back on right now. Hello, Rob. Welcome back.
Ta-da. Melvin Oldflog.
So, can I say this? You're in uni. You've done politics. You've, sometime before this, I assume, watched some theatre shows with Granny and thought, I could do better than this. So you've sat at home. You've wrote theatre shows with your pretension of being greater than the people you've seen. And then you've gone to university.
Yeah, a low bar, to be honest.
Community theatre. And so then in uni, how's the progression going from there then? Where do you go when you're in university? Because I assume this is where the pinnacle is, because you're not in politics now. So
no, the politics. I don't know. I just found we kind of, by the time I did the first year in politics, I was bored shitless of it, because the guy had taught us so well at A level in sixth form that in actual fact you kind of knew it all. And I actually switched subjects to ancient history and classics, which I really enjoyed. And I was into pop bands. So the first couple of first years I was just doing pop bands. And only at the very end of it, basically, I came across Eddie, who was trying to put on a play somewhere. In they wouldn't let him into the main theatre. Theatre group were a snobby bunch of arseholes. They really were. When we first came across them, they were just sort of, very difficult people to circumnavigate, and they were very in and cliquey. And Eddie was trying to put on a play. And in order to get facilities in the university, you had to be a society. And I wanted facilities for my band, and he wanted facilities to do theatre. And so we formed a society called Alternative Productions. And we started putting on events. And I was doing things like cocktail bars and cabarets and even a fashion show. And he just wanted to put on a play, and with bands and local bands and things, and stand-up comedians. And he put on this play, and he needed an extra person, so he asked me, and I did, this sort of bit of slightly terrible acting with him.
Were you guys good friends before this? When you first met, did you hit it off? Best buddies?
I mean, he was absolutely renowned in the halls of residence, because you're not really going to remember. There was a game called Asteroid. That's what it was, Asteroid. And if you sort of beat everybody, it's really like, when they were just really shit little beep, 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 poo, 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 just floating things, no images really. And if you got all the way through something, every now and then you got 3 extra ships, and then you carried on. Well, there was a whole fuss in the common room, because he had been playing this game for 3 hours, and there were just ships all across the top of this thing. The guy was never going to stop playing, and yet these asteroids were going like shit really fast, and he's like, and it was just like, who the fuck's he? And he wasn't even in our hall of residence. He just liked asteroids. And he'd beaten the machine, basically. And so he was known as that. And then I came across him, I don't know, really. He wanted an extra person to act in this play that had a
But you formed the society together. So did you get along? Did you meet and have beers?
Eddie doesn't... He's not a great socializer. He's brilliant working with people, and he brilliantly you get on brilliantly when you're working with him. He's just not. I mean, I say that now. I mean, I honestly, I
were you a better socializer?
Yeah.
Were you kind of amongst things and kind of around?
I probably was, and Ed was always slightly having a problem with being desperately in love with women who, I don't know, I always thought were rather harsh on him. They weren't kindly, shall we say. The poor lad, the guy has got, lost his mum, and that's a massive event at the age of 6. And like, weirdly, I actually don't really remember him ever telling me this at university. Like, I just don't remember him saying, well, I don't remember mum at the age of 6. And so, I have no idea why he wouldn't say. But he was amazingly driven. I mean, he's insanely driven. And, admirably so. There's a story I tell on something which is, on his 24th birthday, we were sat somewhere and we're having quite a nice time. And I said to him, "What's up? It's your birthday." He said, "Well, I'm 24." And I said, "Right, yes. And why are you so miserable?" He said, "Well, Oh, all right. By the time he was 24, Orson Welles had made Citizen Kane. In other words, what he was saying is, I'm 24 and I haven't made what is considered to be the greatest film ever made, and it's pissing me off. And I just thought, that's mad. And I, in many ways, I think if he'd had the right opportunities at the given age, I'm not so sure that he wouldn't have made the greatest film at the age of 24. I think, he has the capacity for this sort of stuff, as we have latterly seen.
Right. But he's definitely been very productive. What was the experience for you like then? So you guys have agreed to going in and help with this play that Eddie's writing. Yeah. So what's the experience like this for you then? What's the experience of going out and doing what I assume is one of your first kind of play experiences in a big play theatre?
We put a play on in a lecture hall rather because they wouldn't because the main theatre group were this sort of snobby bunch. We couldn't get in there, so he put on this play in a lecture hall, and they actually had to put up the sign saying, yes, this is actually licensed for theatre. Nobody's ever done one in here, but it is actually licensed for theatre. And we just did that for 3 or 4 days, and he wanted to do sketch shows because he had been down to London while he was in Sheffield. Goes down to London for a couple of nights and sees Rowan Atkinson's live show, his first show, which is like a massive sellout. He sees it a couple of times and goes, because the format we were working on in those days, it's changed a lot, is that, to become successful in comedy, you have to, the only models you had were Monty Python, that did sketches because they are from Cambridge and Oxford Review, Cambridge Footlights, Oxford Review, all of them are from there. Equally, Peter Cook, Dudley Moore, not only, but also they were from there. With all the sort of Cambridge Footlightsy sort of people. And everyone you knew comedy you admired were these were doing sketch reviews. So Rowan Atkinson, so by the time Rowan Atkinson was doing it, he's an old sort of Footlights guy. You also had Not the 9 O'Clock News, and they were a sketch format, all of which had been Oxford, Cambridge, Footlights people. Griff Rhys-Jones was a producer at the BBC, and he was just picking up, right, well, I did Cambridge Footlights. I wonder where I shall get my next stars from. I shall go and see if there are any in Cambridge Footlights. And lo and behold, we shall use them, whether they're good, bad, or indifferent. So we thought, right, doing comedy sketch reviews are it. Eddie's original plan, and it's a good plan, and it should have worked, is that he was at boarding school and he should have gone up to either Cambridge or Oxford to do, some degree, and then actually have done Footlights or Oxford Review and things. Now, I'm guessing that his private school was sufficiently pants that they didn't even get him into Oxford or Cambridge, which, when you're paying a shitload of money and you've got class sizes of 10, is unforgivable when the person is perfectly intelligent, which Eddie is way intelligent. He really is a bright guy. And the idea that a public school didn't get that guy to Cambridge is outrageous. And so he ended up at Sheffield and tried to repeat the process. What you do is you form a theatre group and you go up to and you do sketches at the Edinburgh Fringe and you get discovered. And you get on TV and you get all the sort of and so that was the plan. And he came to Sheffield and realised they hadn't been up to Edinburgh in like a decade or something. So just go, well, I'm bloody well going to go up to Sheffield. So he formed something called Sheffield University Fringe, because there was Sheffield University Theatre Group. And he said, we're going up to Edinburgh. And he went up there. He just literally got himself a bloody venue, which is insane.
This is the days before the free fringe, I suppose.
Totally, he's paying money for this, and there's nothing online. There are no, we did not have online. So you literally went from venue to venue. You went to a meeting of the Fringe, and you literally, all the venue people were there, and loads of people who wanted to put on shows there.
And so did you get involved in some of this? Were you doing this as well, or was this Eddie primarily, or?
Yeah, I was totally Eddie to start off with, massively. Subsequently, I did the same process, but he was doing it, and he had no one, to say this is what you do. He was just going, "What the fuck do you do?" He just went up to Edinburgh, went to the Fringe office, said, "How do I come and do a show at the Fringe?" And so just go, "Well, I don't know. You might have telephoned before. We're having lunch, Or they probably said, "Oh, we're having lunch, right now. So can you come back in half an hour?" And so he literally did get one show up there. The first one I didn't do. In fact, I don't remember knowing much about it at all. Called Fringe Flung Lunch. And then the next thing he did was the one I did do, called Sherlock Holmes Sings Country. And we'd done it down in Sheffield beforehand, so we'd sort of tested a lot of the material, and we kind of knew that some of it.
And so, before we go on, what was it like testing the material, writing the show? Can you go through the quite detailed steps of your experiences?
I didn't write any of it. Eddie wrote some of the sketches, and a guy called Ian Rowland wrote some sketches, and Eddie's brother Mark wrote some sketches. And Eddie's sketches, I'm going to explain one of his sketches because it's just, I did it about a decade later myself up at Edinburgh, and it's fucking genius. And the sketch goes like this. The theatre opens, the audience come in. The lights go down on the audience, comes up on the stage. On the stage, there's a row of chairs, exactly the same as the chairs that the audience is sitting in. And then the cast comes in, sits down as though they're an audience, sits down, looking at the audience. Then the lights go down on them, and the lights come up on the audience. And you just sit there watching them. And eventually, I'm the guy looking at the program going, "What's wrong?" And we're waiting for the audience to do something. Now that's fucking genius. It really is, and it's Eddie's idea. And eventually he gets into a whole routine about going, "Well, if you're supposed to be doing Pirates of Penzance," another Gilbert and Sullivan show. How educated are you being? You're supposed to be doing Pirates of Penzance, it says here, and you're not. Have you got your swords? Oh, we'll give you swords. Get two members of the audience to fight with swords. And, that kind of postmodernist sort of theatre, he did because he didn't know any better. And he just, but it's a totally ingenious sketch. And he would have brilliant ideas. And if you look at his stand-up now, actually, he's doing sketch comedy. He's just doing both parts. He's never stopped doing sketch comedy. The number of, if you look at some of his most well-known sketches are Darth Vader talking to God, or Darth Vader talking to the catering manager of the Death Star. It's a sketch between two people. And he just does stand-up that is actually a load of sketches. Only he's doing everybody. Well,
maybe you guys had a similar experience to something I saw quite recently with Stuart Lee and Richard Herring, where they talked about how they split up, and when they split up, they found themselves doing the other person's bits. And I think I've seen something. That a lot of material that Eddie first took was material that you guys worked together.
I honestly, much as I would like to take credit, there is no credit to be taken. The guy made himself totally. I held him back as long as I could. In terms of the, doing two parts of a conversation, just in terms of that, I just found it quite interesting. I mean, he, I don't know. I've got lost on that one. I don't know.
It's okay, Rob. No worries. So Rob, so you guys, you've started going up.
Yes.
Yes,
when we were
Sherlock Holmes
doing this Sherlock Holmes' Country series of sketches shows, one of the things we kept going to see, this is where the street performing comes in, is we saw Pookie Snackenberger, who were joining up with a theatre company called Cliffhanger Theatre Company. And there's a stunningly good performer, a guy called Tony Haas. And I, who to this day, and, they've always been around. There's a lovely Rebecca Stevens was in it. She's a really good actress. And they would get together. Pookie Snackenberger were on at the Assembly Rooms in a big show, and Cliffhanger Theatre Company were on at another venue. They would get together at lunchtime and do a show on the Wireworks Playground. And the show I remember them doing was a show called Lunchtime with Mr. Cairo. And it was a kind of, really good show. And it had, Luke Creswell, who is, of course, Stomp. So, he is Mr. Stomp, and his brother is Addison Creswell, who is massive promoter of everything. Addison Creswell's company is, you'll know the name. I just don't, but it started with sort of Pookie Snackenberger and then moved on to Stomp, and, Stomp has been worldwide everywhere. And we were watching them doing what we thought was street performing on Wireworks Playground, and we thought it was great. And can
I just double check the year we're at? I'm sure you said it before, but
I have a timeline of existence which is on my iPad, which I can then tell you exactly the dates, because I noticed this on some of your other broadcasts, which would work. If
you've got some, it's not essential to be, exactly.
I think that would be 1983. 82, 83 that we first went up. Saw Pookie Snackenberger and Cliffhanger Theatre Company doing things. And what they were doing, in the end, you'd get like 400 or 500 people watching them at lunchtime. And then they would say, and, you contribute whatever you want here, but come and see the shows. And they would actually get audiences going to their evening shows because you really like them during the day. And we thought, street performing is cool. That's bloody cool what they're doing. And I think the following year,
Can I ask you just a quick thing before we go on? Can you, and it's difficult to do, particularly as guys, we find it quite difficult to do, but can you explain the experiential quality of watching that street show for the first time?
It was the sheer relaxedness. It, everybody has a presumption that theatre is this thing that you go to a posh building, you should be dressed nicely, the curtains are closed, the curtains open, people come on, do something, they pretend you're not there, you pretend that they're not really just hiding behind a load of curtains. Now everybody thinks that this has always been what theatre is like. Now my master's degree specialised in this subject. In fact, that concept, what we call fourth wall theatre, i.e. that there's an imaginary fourth wall descends down in front of the play, and that we're kind of looking in to somebody's room, and that they're just having their usual worst night of their lives in front of us for the next couple of hours. That's only 175 years old. Prior to that, you didn't do theatre like that. You did not. Shakespearean theatre did not ignore the bloody audience. When every time you get a Shakespearean monologue, he's talking to the audience. And the audience is going, oh, you're right, go, to be or not to be. Yeah, that is a bloody question, isn't it? Oh, he's fucking right, aye. Because there are a bunch of plebs in the kind of, the people in the pit standing up were not clever. They were mostly illiterate. And yet they're watching Hamlet and going, and Hamlet was one of the most successful plays. Now,
and so is it because, like a street show, they're working the edge?
It's because they are in. I actually believe it a type of there's a psychological term, which is a psychoanalytic term, which is transference, whereby you can get the feelings in you over to somebody else. It's what actors do. And it's possible to do it even through the medium of film. I'm going to try an experiment. Just watch me for a bit. How are you feeling, Matt? Am I coming across nicely, or am I coming across threateningly?
No, well, it's definitely you seem unhappy. I'd be more tense interacting with you if you're presenting yourself in this way.
Exactly. I was actually going, right, I'm going to engender hatred in me, and I'm going to transfer it. So through this nonsense electronic medium, I can send you how I'm feeling, that I'm not happy, that I'm tense, that I'm feeling hate. That's exactly what actors do, even through film, even through television. On stage, it's even piss easier because they're right there in front of you. And everything they do, you can feel what they're feeling like, whether they want you to or not. And I believe that's the key. And on a street show, you know, you've got so much taken away from you. You know, it's a bit like, you know, I used to say to drama students that I was sort of lecturing to is, look, if you bloody take Ian McKellen and ask him to do King Lear on King's Cross Station, everybody's going to go, what the fuck's that weird old fuck saying? You put him in the theatre at the Royal Shakespeare Company and surround him with a cast and all the lights and everything. And people will pay 200 quid a night to see him for 2 hours, 3 hours of King Lear. You know, it's kind of what I describe as the mantle of the expert. And it's the, you know, in our preamble when we spoke earlier, I said about an experiment where they were sort of trying to demonstrate that only Germans could possibly follow orders to that level that was required to do the things they did in the concentration camps. And it's not, I actually misquoted. I thought it was a guy called Bruno Bettelheim. It's not, it's Millet. It's the Mill experiment. It's very well known. It's, you know, you sit somebody down, you ask them to ask questions. When the person gets the questions wrong, they can't see the person, they can just hear them. They administer an electric shock. The person will keep getting the questions wrong. In the end, the person going, I've got a heart attack, I can't take this anymore, oh no, Jesus. People will keep administering electric shocks till they kill the person. In actual fact, the person on the other side is not getting electric shocked, he's just acting. But most people, when they are told to carry on administering the shocks and asking the questions by a guy in a white coat with a clipboard, and that's what I call white coating. And I think it's one of the key elements of performance, and certainly absolutely bloody crucial for street performing. If your audience don't believe that you are in charge and you are expert and you are, you know, they will not relax. And when they relax, they enjoy you, they enjoy the show. And the reason why someone like Brian Reed, God love him, the man is a genius, has such difficulty live is because he looks like shit. And he is...
Well, you know, Brian's just said hi, literally this second.
I mean, Brian knows exactly... Hi, Brian. I mean, you know, I've spoken to Brian. Brian, I have issues, okay, which we won't go into. But the difficulty is he is absolutely a genius performer. But he is pretending to be this complete idiot who's reading a book, throwing things up, going, and catch it. Oh, too late. And audiences don't get that. They're not seeing the mantle of the expert. They're not seeing the guy who's in charge. Whereas, for instance, someone like Richie Rich, I mean, Richie Rich, I actually regard him as a personal friend. Most people go, oh my God, he's you know, a monster incarnadine of street performing. I actually like the guy. I have never seen so much charisma in one human being. He will walk out on a pitch. Admittedly, he has the advantage. The mantle of the expert helps when you've got something like a 16-foot high sodding unicycle and a chainsaw.
Yes. And you're also the most tattooed man in the world, which I think helps.
I vowed I would put in gag stories, comedy stories. Comedy story about Richie Rich. We're standing on the back pitch. Someone comes up and goes, have you seen Richie Rich's new publicity? And I said, no. He takes out this poster, and we're all looking at this poster going, holy fuck, Richie Rich looks a bit weird nowadays. But we all believe this is Richie Rich. You know what it was? It was an orc from Lord of the Rings, but we all absolutely thought that was what Richie Rich looked like nowadays.
Oh, poor
we
Rich.
had no problem believing that was Richie Rich, and it was totally an orc. And as soon as you went, no, it's an orc, you went, of course it's an orc. It's not Richie. Richie doesn't look like that. I have a pet theory. I think he's actually in Lord of the Rings at some point. I think he was knocking around New Zealand and they just cast him. I have a funny feeling at one point he's riding one of the weird elephants in Lord of the Rings as an extra.
Maybe. Well, I'm hoping I'll get him on one day. You know,
if anybody knows,
we'll see. We can
tell him.
Yes, yeah, please.
I've just noticed Paddy Bramwells has just said, Brian, I think you look lovely. Brian, we know you look lovely. Just the audience can't see the goldenness of your soul. All they see is the kind of weirdness of your body, really. But yeah.
So let's drag this conversation back to yourself, Rob, as well.
Okay.
You know, so you're with Eddie. You've done your first sets of plays. You're now. Yeah. After doing Edinburgh, you're kind of assigned to work together. You've decided that we're a crew.
Yeah, we then started doing shows in Sheffield as doing rival to theatre company. So theatre group were the posh snobby ones. We were the Abigail Alternative Productions, and we were doing late night comedy shows, which everyone liked. And everybody, theatre group was a bit like, well, that's fucking interesting stuff you're doing there, And
what kind of work were you doing? It was still very sketch based stuff?
No, we'd started doing storyline sketch stuff. We'd seen a lovely show called Brogue Mail, it was called, by someone called Paul B. Davis, who's quite a good excellent comedy writer. We saw a show called Brogue Mail. We thought this was great. It was like a parody of the Sherlock Holmes and Watson thing, so it's not exactly stunning, but the guy was doing it all with sound effects, and it was kind of a great show. And we went back and we did something called The Sloane Ranger, starring Lord Philby Sloane and Sir Roland Winthrop Scott. And originally Eddie wasn't that fussed about doing it, and he then sort of went, oh, all right, then I'll just have a go. And he just tried, and he was just so fucking brilliant playing this Roland Winthrop Scott, the sort of Dr. Watson character. I say, Sloane. Absolutely. And he was just so insanely funny.
And how are you guys writing now? Are you guys now writing?
We're writing
collaboratively. Have you managed to pull some influence in the grouping?
We are writing storyline stuff. So Lord Philby Sloane and Roland Scott Winthrop we advertise the show as a 2 one-act shows that's going on late night in this theatre. And the first thing is the Sloane Ranger. And at the end of the Sloane Ranger, they get sent off in a time machine by the evil baddie, the two of them. Act 2 starts and it's set in space, and it's a whole different space show. Halfway through the space show, which you think is advertised as a completely different show called It Stayed in Outer Space or something. And suddenly a time machine goes off and Roland Scott Winthrop and Lord Philby Sloane arrive in the middle of the other play. And, whereas everybody's got laser protection suits on, he's got a good old-fashioned Remington 45 and shoots people. And so it was, but it was a sketch show. It had sketches in it, but it was a story.
So it's like a thematic sketch show, a sketch that has a narrated.
It had characters running all the way through it. So at the end of the show, Roland Scott Winthrop a thing, and then there was another show. Eddie wrote a show which he had every intention of taking up to Edinburgh. So he was going to do it in Sheffield, take it up to Edinburgh, and that was called World War II: The Sequel. And he wrote loads of sketches, which were, honestly, they're just insanely funny. They really are funny. He couldn't quite get the plot on the thing going, and to this day he has a firm belief that I'm good at plot, and it is solely based on something that we did damn near 30 years ago. And I don't know,
Well, you spent a lifetime writing theatre.
I do. I write.
Give yourself credit.
I'm at 23 full-length plays. I've got one play which is a comedy thing, which has had 50 professional productions in Germany. So it's had 50 professional productions. I still get the royalties for it. We did it here in Britain originally, but the idea was, and it's literally doing Ben-Hur on stage, and it's like with 4 people, and that Ben-Hur is a woman. Now I swear to God that it sounds like a sketch somebody must have done. Ben-Hur, it's a woman. And it was definitely Eddie's idea. I was in favour of doing Gone with the Wind on stage, and he said, no, Ben-Hur, it's got the chariot race and galleys and things like this. And we did a sort of thing on the Wireworks playground. So we went up to Edinburgh. We were doing an evening show called World War II. Are we still
World War II? So just before we move on to that bit, with World War II, so you've basically worked out the plot for this bit then? You sat and worked some scripts and refined it.
He had a lot of very funny sketches, which were, people really enjoyed, but the plot was sort of, it was a thing. And I kind of went, what the plot is going to be is a group of entertainers who are then sent in, and they're going to entertain Hitler and kill Hitler. That they're to assassinate Hitler, a bunch of entertainers.
And was this a point of inspiration, or did you sit labouring, sweating, throwing pieces of paper out of a typewriter for days?
No, there was an occasion when we were supposed to be writing Ben-Hur, and we were going to be on, I think, on the Monday, and Saturday night we were writing it in the office of the student newspaper, because they had typewriters. We didn't have computers and stuff. We were writing it on typewriters, and Eddie was going around the room going, right, and telling us to write. And what we didn't notice is that he actually wasn't writing anything. He was just going around telling us to write. And cruelly, I think I wrote one of the funniest lines I've ever written that night in that office. And the line runs, the situation, because it's Ben-Hur, you get Rome at one point, and you've got Julius Caesar walking past the soothsayer. And the soothsayer says, Caesar, beware the Ides of May. And Caesar goes, what? The Ides of May? Why? Because you'll have been dead 2 months by then. Now, tragically, I don't think I've ever written a funnier comedic line. It's a bit like Peter Cook famously wrote the one-legged Tarzan sketch at the age of 18. And, by the time he died, he says, I've never written anything funnier than the one-legged Tarzan sketch. I think that's the funniest single line I've ever written. I've written situation stuff, and I've written very funny stuff, and I've had funnier shows. But as a single line, that's kind of like just one of those, I don't know. And it's still there.
Isn't that the weird horror?
Of course it is.
Is that a weird horror as a creative, that you create something beautiful and great, and then you think, oh fuck, I may never be able to do that again?
No, always believe that you will. And the other thing about it, I've slowly but surely become much more democratic, and secretly all the best directors are. Everybody has a theory that a theatre director is going to say, now move your hand and put your finger like this and do it like that, point it like that. Marionetting actors. If you do that, you're a bit of a shit director, in all honesty. The best directors get you in a room, get you playing, and actually what comes out of the room is the play. Directors will go in with absolutely fixed ideas as to what it should be like, and if they hang on to those, they're a bit of a shit director. If they walk into the room and then somebody has a better idea or a slightly different idea, you should try it, play with it, see how it goes. One of the funniest lines I think we ever had in the theatre shows, and we did a lot, came from Peter Milnicek. Now, Peter Milnicek, a man of many things, but the character he was playing was a pirate, Lucky, who had lost his legs, arms, other legs, whole of his body. All he was a head. So there's just a head called Pirate Lucky. And there's a whole conversation going on between a pirate and another younger pirate, and he's going, and at the end of the day, my lad, and Pirate Lucky's just there, just Pete Milnicek's head, obviously through a table, but it's just a head. And they're like, and at the end of the day, there's always a hanging for a pirate. And Pete Milnicek says in rehearsal, I ain't afraid of hanging. In fact, it's just a fucking head. And it's actually the funniest line in the thing. And, and everyone go, well, that's my line. And what crops up in rehearsal, I believe, is the play. I never, I write the script, I do this, but when you go into rehearsal, if you don't change it, if you don't play with it, it's a bit like an architect will draw a load of plans. Well, that's a load of plans. Have you noticed that buildings aren't flat pieces of paper? They're bricks and mortar. And inevitably, when you're building bricks and mortar, things change and you have to alter it. And you go, you know what? That doesn't actually fit. We're going to have to, saw a bit off. And that's exactly what you do with a script, or you should do. If you don't, you're a bit of an idiot. And anyone who believes that the playwright is sovereign, I also think is a bit of a, in Britain, we believe in the playwright a lot, that the script is somehow sacred. The guy wrote it.
Is this a similar thing to what Will Self would say about the writer is isolated and the inspiration is from an individual thing?
I mean, I've got various productions of mine, which literally the reason why certain things are in them, designs over there, was because of what sodding room I was writing in. So when we made a play, an adaptation of the Odyssey, I was in the kitchen. And unsurprisingly, in order to solve some of the problems of staging the Odyssey, which is full of extraordinary and fantastic things, unsurprisingly, there are scenes involving a huge amount of cling film. And there are scenes that involve a lot of tin foil. Why? They were in the fucking kitchen. And that's what I used and started playing with in order to try and get round. And, I literally was using a kettle to make steam in the kitchen in order to do sort of light effects with torches and make masks out of tin foil and things like this. Paddy Bramwell's was in that. And in fact, I'm going to show you. I have. Do you recognise Gareth? I'm seeing if there's Paddy Bramwell's as Odysseus.
Wow,
he's looking good.
Oh, look at Paddy looking all, yeah.
I mean, Paddy.
Congratulations, Paddy.
That's a lady called Charlotte Palmer. She was a street performer.
Charlotte Palmer is going to be interviewed later on this month.
Excellent.
I think, or August. Sorry.
They did, and there's Gareth. Do you know Gareth Jones?
I do know Gareth Soapy. He should be on quite soon as well, hopefully.
They're all looking very good. That's the Odyssey, and the Odyssey is the one that that's them in the Odyssey. They looking so.
So
cool.
Who took that fine picture then?
I'm a professional photographer, a guy called Robert Workman, who does a lot of the West End. I mean, we honestly were doing, by the time we were doing the theatre shows, we were, we really were doing professional theatre shows. But the key to...
Well, but before we get to that...
Yeah, sorry.
I'd like to pull you back. You're in a sweatshop. Eddie's running around inside this sweatshop going, you must write more.
Right. Yeah. So we wrote this version of Ben-Hur. I think we were writing this kind of mad version of Ben-Hur, which was going to be on the following week in different venues. And we kind of went out there. And what we realized is that we kind of had this thing of upstaging each other live on stage, so that we didn't think it was a crime. So there was a scene which had a load of plot in it. And I remember I was just supposed to be standing there doing sod all in this thing, but I had some grapes and I just started sort of pretending to eat the grapes. And by the end of it, everyone's watching me eating grapes and nobody is listening to the plot. To be honest, nobody gave a damn. And what's funny, as soon as they realised we were doing this, they would start corpsing and laughing, and the audience bloody loved it. And it's breaking down that fourth wall.
One moment, please carry on.
That's okay.
It's
breaking down the fourth wall.
I'm in an interview. What? I'm in an interview.
Is an interview. And
sorry, the joys of doing broadcasting from inside your boat.
It's as I said, find a noble tradition of street performers living on boats. I can't think why we became such a bunch of landlubbers. So what were we were at that point of and
so you guys were trying to upstage each other, and it seems like what you were describing is that the audience would cotton on to this. And as the audience would cotton on, they get the game.
Yes.
And they like the game.
Yes, and we would tell them the game. We would actually kind of, go, you know what he's done. And I mean, the famous kind of scene that we did in a much later version of Ben-Hur. And Paddy will remember this. Paddy, was one of the main actors in Ben-Hur, playing the baddie. And there is a scene where there's a slave comes on with poison, tries to poison the Roman governor Messala, and he puts down something that is obviously looks like apple juice. When you pick it up, Messala goes, "Drink this," and in actual fact, in the comedy of the play, it's not poison. Somebody's just peed in a glass. One of the zealots who are trying to, "I will wee in a glass and give it to Messala." And how will that affect him? Well, it will make him look very silly when he drinks my wee, sort of thing. So it's really kind of a stupid thing. But in actual fact, in the context of the play, you then go, drink. Messala goes, "Drink the wine, slave," and he goes, "All right then." And then I was the actual actor. Then you have to go and actually play it on such a realistic level, and that the other audience, the car starts corpsing, and in the end, as an actor, you have to go, "You've switched it." And Paddy's still going, "Drink the wine, slave." And he goes, "It's actually piss, isn't it?" And you actually are playing that somebody backstage has switched the prop for a glass of piss. And that this actor, who's already having arguments, they've seen an argument on stage already.
So this is the joke is external to the narrative.
Yeah.
It's not inside the narrative. This is external to the narrative. It's laying upon
exactly.
it. Yeah.
And like the opening of the show of Ben-Hur is that we had a thing where we'd go out on stage, we'd go out before the show started, and we'd talk to the audience, tell them sit down, do this, do that, do that, do that. Originally, because we were doing a promenade, and you do need to get instructions over to an audience for a promenade thing. And this just became standard. We'd go out and we'd do the warm-up every night, and you go in and you'd warm up the audience. We were doing street performing technique, audience building, audience warm-up, only we're in the theatre.
So when you say the technique, you mean clap and cheering?
Yeah, absolutely. You get the audience cheering, shouting, going absolutely fucking apeshit crazy before you start the play. Do you want to know what a good audience?
Is there techniques to that? Is there things you learned when you were doing that? Is there a way specifically you did that?
It was very much what you do in Covent Garden, where you get them clapping and cheering because it just gets more people in and it perks them. You get them to do it in the theatre, and they kind of love it when you come out and talk to them and go, "Good evening, hello, welcome to Performance Theatre Company. Has anybody been here, done a Performance Theatre Company show before?" And we would get, nearly every night, 50% of the audience had seen us before doing stuff. We had our own audience, and we used to film the last night. Oh yeah, Paddy says on his quote, we used to film the last night. I used to film the last night to get the script. So the script wasn't until the last night. Whatever was the last night, that's the show, sort of thing. And,
so you did like an experimental run.
No, we would do a dress rehearsal, and we'd do a tech rehearsal with
like a stand-up, testing a set.
Yes, you do want to practice the set. Yeah, we would run the show in before. We would just have like a couple of nights to get it right. We would mostly know that it was going to work because it had made us laugh in rehearsal.
But when you say you're filming at the end,
the
end of the run, or is it the end
usually
the last night of the run?
4 or 5 week run. We always did. I was what I thought of us as a project theatre company. We would do 4 or 5 weeks. We wouldn't do, we would do every night for 4 or 5 weeks. We wouldn't do one night here, one night.
And so when you say you filmed and took it, so you've done your 4 week run, and then you filmed the last day, and then once you film that last day, and the last night,
would then write up the script.
And once you've kind of notated,
You're breaking up at the moment, Matt.
It works.
Do you want to run that?
I'm sorry.
No.
Yeah, no problem. So once you've filmed after the 4-week run, you take the script. You then try and take this run to other places. You use this script then as a finished piece.
Always
the run is a developmental process.
We try and take the show to another place. So we once did Three Musketeers, the original stage version, which was Paddy Bramwell's, Pete Milnerchek. Was Mike in the microphone? Was in one version of Three Musketeers.
Michael Howe, yeah.
Michael Howe, yeah. Of Three Musketeers. I have stuff around me. Not of Three Musketeers. And I got a bit kind of. Can you just excuse me very briefly?
Yeah, of course, no problem. Is that a Covent Garden Road sign you have behind you?
It is a Covent Garden Road sign.
Is that a bit nicked?
They were no longer using it. They were replacing it with some new not-so ones. But what I've discovered is you can now buy them. They're actually entirely viable, sort of thing. I would have put more light on.
But not originals. Not like what you've got there. That's got provenance.
Well, that was in the same way that Paddy nicked. There's got there's various street performers with lumps of cobblestone. I got the sign because they took the old ones down. I think one of the buildings was going or something, so they took one off a building, and I naffed it. And I just sort of went, oh my God, it's Covent Garden WC2. I'm having that. But I've subsequently seen them, so you can certainly get hold of them, sort of thing. So yes, it is a Covent Garden sign.
So So we're an hour and 22 minutes, and I don't know if we've hit your first street show yet. We've backed around, we moved forward, we moved backwards. Yes. Can we get the idea? Can we get to your first street show?
Yeah, Eddie and I sort of were doing stuff in Sheffield, and then we started working as a double act together, doing various things. There was a point where we were asked to do an old time music hall, and we came up with a knife throwing act and things, and we were doing comedy stuff there. Eddie had subsequently got chucked out of the university.
Was it?
And then he went down to London.
Was this the thing? Because I hear off. Really sorry to interrupt you.
No, not at all.
Was this the? Yeah, sorry. Sorry about that, mate. So when you guys were doing stuff as a double act, was this part of the kind of 80s variety stand-up scene that I heard about? Because it's obviously doing exist now.
We were doing what we would call, we used to refer to it as comedy bollocks shows, which was when you weren't doing skill-based stuff, you were doing comedy bollocks. So that we were doing a fake knife throwing show. We used to do an escape from a woolly jumper, which subsequently turned out to be an old Mendeeses act, escaping from a woolly jumper. So, and what happened is someone I knew from Sheffield University saw them on Covent Garden, came up to Sheffield and said, we could do escaping from a woolly jumper as though it was his. I then started doing escaping from a woolly jumper, and it's like literally it's a cardigan, and but you absolutely throw yourself around as though you're trying to escape from a woolly jumper and do everything about it. And Eddie would be timing me 10 seconds to escape from a woolly jumper, and that was it. We did that, and we tried. And
did you go through the? Did you go through the kind of the process of putting someone in a straitjacket? Did you get the arms and tie the arms?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Kind of he would tie the arms around the back and everything. And ironically, it is quite difficult getting out of a woolly jumper when you're lying on the floor in it. And then we did a thing called the water evaporation trick, which is an act of genius, whereby you get a bag of water and you get a bucket of water and you hold this bag in front. Eddie's holding a bag in front of him, and you pour this water into the bag, and then it'll disappear by the power of his enormous brain. And it's all, listen, you can hear it hissing there, steaming away by the power of Eddie's enormous brain. And then he finishes, and then when he walks off, he's wearing Wellingtons, and you just hear and he's got Wellingtons full of water. And it's hysterical. It's hysterical in summer. It's not so funny in the middle of fucking winter when Eddie's got soaking wet, cold feet all the time. And the poor bastard did put up with a lot. He used to get all...
So these are your street bits, or are these the indoor kind of variety standards?
No, we were doing both. So when we were doing what we call the comedy bollocks, you could do this escape from a woolly jumper, the water evaporation trick, disappearing cornflakes, where literally you eat the cornflakes, and then the reappearing cornflakes, sort of thing. We were the messiest show, but we were doing, honestly, it will sound insane, but we were doing jongleurs, we were doing banana cabaret. We loved banana cabaret, they were great. We were doing the Tunnel Palladium as it was then, Malcolm Hardy's whole thing. It's now the Greenwich, tunnel show, thing. It moved. And we were doing the comedy, we did the Comedy Store.
I looked at some pictures.
Sorry?
Of Malcolm Hardy's place.
Yeah.
I said, when I was researching earlier on, I looked through and found some pictures of you guys in Malcolm Hardy's place.
Oh, okay.
That's
Malcolm really liked us because
an incredible place.
Yeah, Malcolm really liked us, which is pretty rare for him to like any act, because we were streety and we kept doing different things, and he always liked that. He hated people who came and did the same act again and again and again. And Malcolm, Malcolm's stuff was just like, it's just. I'm not sure. I think in my head it was Malcolm, but he literally put on a pair of tights one night, and then just opened cans of baked beans, and poured them down the tights. And like 20 cans of baked beans later, I swear to God, it's the funniest thing I have ever seen in my life. Tight Malcolm Hardy standing there in tights with no underpants, so you just could, the only thing obscuring him with Heinz but 57, and just I don't know, just hysterical. But people would watch. We would watch. People would just watch Malcolm do anything really, and
was the fact that he was at play.
Yeah, he was a sort of larger than life.
He didn't need to be funny. He didn't need to. He was just.
His version of an introduction for you is go, "Hey, seen these guys before? They're not shit. Here they are." And if someone went on, did an act, and they didn't do too well, he'd walk on and go, "Oh, well, they were a bit crap, weren't they? Well, I won't be booking them again. They were shit. Never mind. Anyway, next act's not so bad." I mean, no presentation skills whatsoever. The guy would just, But he had a sort of history of being in Greatest Show on Legs. He was with people, and
why did it work then? Because lots of people talk about that place. Lots of people talk about that place. Why did it work?
It was actually sort of anti-glitzy glamour. It was completely, the original venue's right next to the Blackwall Tunnel. I mean, honest to God, there was no way of getting there apart from by taxi. There's no public transport gets you there, or at that time anyway. And it was just a shithole. The only thing that it was next to were gasometers and Blackwall Tunnel, and it was just a terrible venue. But he ran it for years, and he paid really well. It got really good audiences, and if they hadn't seen your show before and you were new and you were funny, they were great audiences. But they were tough audience if they'd seen your show before. They were tough audience if you weren't very good, and they were a tough audience if you didn't listen to what they were doing. If they shout out I can remember. Malcolm's what's her names? He's squashing ad lib. He's squashing heckle lines with just sort of like the toughest. I just remember him saying, some guy shouted out, some children are born by this Le Boyer method, where they're born into water and they're brought into soft light and they're stroked and they're placed on their mother's tummy and fed, and other children are just ripped out of their mother's cunt. Just the man has no control. Stood up there in bright sunlight, smack their ass to get the shit out of them. And you know what, mate? Somebody didn't smack your ass hard enough, sort of thing. And everyone would just love him for being just insanely mean, and insanely cruel. and he just was, and actually he was quite a quiet bloke when not on stage. He wasn't garrulous or anything. He was pretty much, "Oi, you okay? Yep, that's all right. That's okay. Shit weather, mate." Okay.
Was there a line I've heard he shares with Brian Reed? Apparently, a put down. I've heard it's the best heckle put down line.
What's his line? What are you referring to?
So apparently this is the best heckle put down line. Apparently he shares it with Brian, and I've heard Brian say this line.
I mean,
where someone will turn around, tell a joke. Tell a joke, mate.
Yeah.
And so the response to this is, "Oh, you want to hear a joke? Okay, well I'll tell you a joke. Irishman and Englishman walk into a bar, and they all think you're a cunt."
Yep, that sounds like Malcolm. Yep. I actually share two things. I actually share something with Brian because I invented for him, and you say invented, and you go, Jesus, surely somebody must have done that. When you're doing a Diablo and you let it bounce, and you do bounce, and then the third one you just let it hit your head, and I did that. And Brian said, "Oh, that's good. I like that." And I traded it. He could do that if I could use his line about when you're doing Diablo round the leg, and you go, in America, this is called around the world. Everywhere else, it's called around the leg, sort of thing. And I've always used that line. And it's such a Brian line, but because he was doing the bounces, it is. It was always that kind of. I mean, Brian is.
But that's what it's clever and crap. Clever and crap. It looks like crap, but it's clever.
It's ingenious, I mean, and I would argue with him, saying, "No, that's a stupid idea, Brian." He once came here, and he was literally he didn't have an electric drill. All he had was a drill, and he was slowly drilling through the handle of an umbrella for reasons surpassing understanding. Except he then showed me why. And he actually created an umbrella, which, he'd have a water tank and a pump. And this umbrella, he would think, and it would rain on the inside of the umbrella. And I said, that's stupid. What you want is the same arrangement, but the water comes out the top of the umbrella. So you stay dry and it's as though it's raining. Isn't that a better idea? And Brian went, "No, I want it to rain on the inside." And when he did it, he was absolutely fucking right, because it's hysterical and it's absolutely Magrittean image of this surreal thing of an umbrella that rains on the inside. Everywhere else is sunny, and he's walking around with this umbrella pissing down on him. Not just a bit of light rain, pissing down on him like a power shower. And it's just hysterical.
He took the storm with him.
Sorry?
Yeah. So, your first street show.
First street show. Yes, we came down to Covent Garden and we made £18 doing comedy bollocks.
What was the experience like? Just very slowly and gradually, talk me through starting, gathering, the intrepidation potentially before, how you felt.
I mean, in true Izzardian sort of fashion, I'd come down to. I was still doing stuff. I was still trying to get a degree, and I still had to do another show up in Sheffield because I'd agreed to do a theatre show up at with Sheffield up at Edinburgh Fringe. So I had to go and do this version of Three Men in a Boat, which I'd adapted, and I had to do that. But I had this spring, summer where I could come down and work with Eddie on Covent Garden, and we did this first show. And Eddie's approach is, right, well, we're going to study it. Of course we will. I mean, honest to God, he's insanely assiduous. He will really research stuff, really kind of like, when he was, we used to live in the same flat, and he had a room which had a map of London on it. And, like those old World War II maps with little flags in, saying where all the German infantry were or something. He had a map of London which had, and they were colour-coded and had all sorts of little signifiers of every single stand-up club and every comedy cabaret club. And he was working his way through every single one of them, phoning everyone, getting a booking with everyone, doing a note spot, doing anything. Absolutely, just like, a military exercise in how to get yourself known as on the stand-up circuit. And we had jumped in, and because when we jumped in, we did an open spot at the Comedy Store. Because we did that, you're doing the Comedy Store? Yeah, we did the Comedy Store. They booked us, and then we, Banana Cabaret went all right, and Jongleurs took us, and because we were doing the top ones, everyone, oh, you're doing that? Oh yeah, all right, we'll book you. And they used to just book us. We were called official touring at that bit. But the first street show, 18 quid. We'd spent about a week watching other acts, how to do it. And we'd gone, actually, we like the way Chris and Alex set out these white barriers with white chains, which they had to do for because they were juggling fire. You had to have a
What were
barrier.
the people like with you? What were the performance like when you arrived?
Mostly, I mean, we were jokingly known as University Challenge because I think they, I think someone like Nick
They
Nicholas,
thought you to be posh boys.
Yeah, I mean, Eddie's voice is, honest to God, I mean, it's not his fault. I mean, and in those days he used to have Edward Fox. Do you remember Edward Fox, the actor? He's absolutely the best British actor ever. He was the original Dave the Jackal. He's absolutely, and he had Edward Fox's perfect, haircut. English private school haircut.
A fop? Is it
kind of like a fop. Yeah. It was just, and he just is. He just ended right. Okay, yeah, no, I'm fine, and it was, and I had gone through an apotheosis and then just ended up slightly neutral. Really, I'd kind of lost my Birmingham accent at one point. I had a London accent. I used to sort of imitate a Sheffield accent because I was in local pop bands. And it would be, and you'd go on Sheffield radio, and they'd be like, this song's great. I really like that. That's great. Rob from 16 again. What do you think? Well, I think that this music is lacking a certain sort of counterpoint. It's, and I sounded fucking like Lord Snooty, so I ditched that and started going, yeah, that's great, that's all right. And, okay, I'm a Sheffield lad too, because in fact that's Liverpool. So I would sort of try and fit in, but got to Covent Garden, and so by the time I got to London, and I'd been through Birmingham, Sheffield, and I was just a bit like, I've run out of accents. I don't know. I've just gone neutral. And so I've just ended up like this, sounding like this, but we did sound like.
And were they? So did the guys there? So they've turned around, and it seems like calling you University Challenge is quite friendly. I mean, it's definitely a little bit shoulder budgy, but it's friendly. It's warm.
They let us. I mean, they had no problem about us performing. The pitch at that time was being run by Alternative Arts, who I frankly have absolutely nothing good to say about. I really don't. I mean, I know other people have praised them for things, but most of the people.
Why so?
They were. They ran a booking agency at the same time, and they had a very specific coterie of performers, and the people who praise them are usually the people who are getting all the gigs. And they were very condescending. They were, of the opinion that, when they didn't want the pitch, you street performers could have it. Despite the fact that they had come along post street performers making it work. So that's why you really need someone like JJ Waller, Tim Batt, or members of Kooky Snackenberger, because they started the pitch.
Can you explain that a bit? Well, I'd really like to talk to them, definitely. But just now, since I got you in front of me, what do you mean by the fact that Alternative Arts came after?
That they came along, there were guys working the pitch, like Sid Rasputin was, I think, one of the guys working the pitch. And
so that's John McKenna, yeah? Sid Rasputin,
yeah, that's right.
So John will be here on the 24th.
Okay, so I mean, he is before me, sort of thing. I can just about remember him being on. The tail end of him was, when we started. So, by the time I can remember being down there and just seeing the Vicious Boys doing some of their last shows on Covent Garden, doing their video show. And the Vicious Boys by then had got onto TV, and then they got onto a thing called a live children television show called Get Fresh, which was on Saturday mornings, like these magazine shows of all different pop bands and things. And they were like a live act. It goes out live. get fresh.
Can I ask you this? I've got this little.
We actually ended
just
when
very...
the Vicious Boys left. We ended up doing the same show. So we were doing.
Yeah. So it's we can hear the lag. I start to talk, and I can see that you realise I talk about 10 seconds after I start to do it.
Oh, no.
The Vicious Boys. Do you think that the Dangerous Brothers with Aid Edmondson and Rick Mayall was kind of a take from that? I've heard a little bit about them. It sounds like it might have been heavily inspired.
You'd have to ask Angelo or Andy Smart, who were the Vicious Boys. The Dangerous Brothers, I mean, basically, that grouping, the Dangerous Brothers, and, that kind of what was called the comic strip, I mean, they are one of the truly rare British comedy things that are not Footlights or Oxford Review. And they are to be treasured. They called themselves 20th Century Coyote originally, and they were from Manchester University. And how they got through is, like, fuck me, because bugger all else gets through, I mean, by tradition, the way through British comedy was either you did the Northern Comedy Club circuit, or you did Butlin's holiday camp performer, or you were Oxford or Cambridge Review, in which case you got straight into the BBC, no problem at all. And whenever me and Eddie started, it was a bit like, well, if ever there was suddenly, if you knew that this guy had been a Northern Club comic, or you knew that he'd been doing donkey's years of, the holiday camp stuff, the Heidi High stuff, and then ended up on Saturday evening TV, or Bruce Forsyth, who'd been going forever, had played in those London Palladium sort of worlds, and, when there were clubs called the Talk of the Town and things like that from the 60s. If suddenly somebody's on television, they've got a whole sketch show to themselves, and you've got no fucking idea who they are, or you've never heard of them before, then just look up Cambridge Footlights or Oxford Review, and there they will be, sort of thing. And it is one of those sort of, you can see I've got a bit of a chip on my shoulder. You think I'm bad? Seriously, Eddie's had 20 years of his comedy performing life stolen from him because he didn't get into either Oxford or Cambridge. Because he's undoubtedly that talented. Myself, I make no claims for my abilities, but he's proved how talented a comedian he is, how talented a writer, how talented a performer he is. And 20 odd years. And
do you believe that's the same to this day? Do you think to this day that there's still...
I don't think so.
I suspect there probably is. But I'll be honest, when I talk to most people in the arts who are working, high end in the arts reasonably well, they tend to be well spoken. You don't get many people going, "All right, mate, how you doing? Yeah, all right. Well, I'm acting this thing. It's gonna be great." But and I don't know whether that's because people have to.
And even when you
take the affectation of the upper middle class.
Yeah, when you get the pub landlord guy, who is of course Oxford Footlights, and he's got 2 first degrees, I believe. He's a really bright bloke. I mean, he's a very nice bloke, and it didn't hurt going to Cambridge. I think I'm pretty sure it's Cambridge. Equally, Sacha Baron Cohen, and his character stuff is so. It is fairly omniscient. It has to be said. And Lord Lover Duck, a lot of them are really nice and very pleasant. And as with all privilege,
about Sacha
you
Baron
have
Cohen.
no idea that you are that privileged. Go on, sorry, Sacha Baron Cohen.
Yeah. Yes, I heard this thing that was told by a couple of friends that Sacha Baron Cohen may have lifted his Ali G routine from a very commonly mentioned person on these videos.
Oh,
a certain doctor.
Doctor? Oh, I see what you mean. It's Dr. Stewart. I mean, Dr. Stewart's just an utterly unique.
Dr. Stew.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking about Dr. Stewart. Yeah. I mean, I could say. I mean, believe you me, there's a sort of legend where there's a hit, there's a writ, and there's a sort of, if somebody has some success, somebody will always go, "I wrote that years ago." I mean, 5 years before Pirates of the Caribbean, would you believe we were doing a show? I have all these bits of paper around me called Pirates, right? Mostly about Pirates of the Caribbean. And here is, in fact, you can recognize these people. This is Pirates. There is Shandy South. This guy was a lovely double act.
Oh, wow.
There at the back is Pete Milnercheck. Don't know if the light's ruining that.
Is that Melvin there?
No, that's not Melvin. This is a guy called Dean Mark, who is now a major bass player. He's been a bass player for people like Jamiroquai. He was Jamiroquai's bass player. That's Shandy South acting. That's Dean Mark, and that's Pete Milnercheck at the back. And that's the show called Pirates. And Pirates is this kind of paradoxical show. 5 years before Pirates of the Caribbean, we were doing a show where it's all about pirates, apart from there is this strange mystical thing about gods fighting over good and bad in it, you know. And you go, now, I would be there going, wait a moment, that's my idea. You started, of course it fucking wasn't their idea. There's, you know, it's just what people have the same ideas. And whenever there's a hit, there's a writ. Somebody always emerges out of the woodwork saying, you know what, I wrote that, I did that, it was me, you know, and inevitably, you know, it's sort of just not true. I've got a shot. If I put these right,
I'm loving our tangents for moving on.
There is Eddie Izzard and myself. Let's get this right. That's Eddie Izzard and myself doing a sword fighting show.
Are you going to have to finally frame it?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Sort of thing.
Well, that's
better.
We can see it. Well, I certainly can if everyone else can't.
Yes.
So that brings me back to it. I'd say I love our tangents. I like the fact that we're moving into incredibly fascinating territory every time we move off the path.
Yeah.
But let's draw it back to your first street show.
It was messy. We kind of used what we thought was Chris and Alex's opening, whereby you put out a piece of, you know, we used the barriers, asked the audience to come up to the barriers, got them up to the barriers, got them clapping and cheering.
Put out a rope.
No, in those days there was actually a white plastic chain and a series of posts which they had to put up if you were using fire, which was dictated by alternative arts that you had to do this. Years later, we discovered when talking to a fire officer, no, that was a completely pointless thing to do. Little comedy moment, comedy thing. I wanted to do this. What's the worst juggling drop ever on Covent Garden? I
don't know.
Okay, I'm going to let the guy be nameless because, you know, he was juggling, and bit of a joke juggling fire goes up near a baby's pushchair. Actually, it's not a pushchair, it's a pram. And you go, oh, and as he goes away, up slips, and a flaming fire torch goes straight in a baby's pram. That, I believe, is the worst ever juggling drop on Covent Garden. And you just go, and the whole audience goes, oh, he set fire to this pram, sort of thing. And honest to God, you know, if
I remember the story right, there was no baby in the pram. If I remember the story correctly,
there was a baby in the pram. It was an occupied baby. Wow. Member of the audience. This guy drops a fire torch into the thing. Brian Reed will know who did that actually, and I'm letting him.
Well, I know who did that as well, I suspect, but you know, I certainly shall not name him.
My other favourite one was when I was watching Aileen, who you've had on recently. Aileen, you know the sort of joke about going after a pigeon. Because we had a knife throwing show, we'd go after a pigeon. We used to have these big water pistols, and we'd go after a pigeon, squirt it, water pistol fly off. Aileen went after it with a fire torch once, or the 3 fire torch, and she went after this pigeon. And this pigeon sort of flew up slightly the wrong direction, and she pretended to hit it in. No, she didn't pretend. She smacked it out of the sky. This pigeon hit this pigeon with 3 fire torches, knocked it straight on the ground. And honest to God, it's only the fact that, you know, you're inevitably standing at the back of the pitch, and we are just pissing ourselves laughing because our sense of humour has got so sort of sick that, you know, we find this stuff funny. You know that.
Well, it's almost because you know she's fucked up at that point. You know, yeah.
bird sort of flapping around on the ground, looking as though secretly it should be put out of its misery. It certainly was a bit like, holy fuck, I've just...
Can I just...
Yeah.
Can I just... Bird's been hurt. You're laughing at the fact that Aileen is now in a fucking horrible situation and she's in front of how many hundred people? Just essentially, she just maimed a poor animal.
Yeah. She just smacked a pigeon out at the air. Yeah. I can't remember if the show recovered. My other favourite one for animals was Paul Morocco, who you had on recently. We'd all been working our asses off on Fringe Sunday, in Edinburgh, which in those days was down on the fields at the bottom of the thing where the Parliament is now, and we were all doing massive shows. And Paul Morocco just goes, I'm going to do one more show. And he's doing a massive show. But by now, people are packing up, people are moving stuff. And some arseholes driving a car really quite quickly across the back of his show, not endangering. But somewhere along the line, a dog runs out and this car drives over the dog. The thing. And the whole audience is no longer watching Paul Morocco. They are all looking at dead dog or this maimed dog twitching away, sort of thing. And Paul Morocco, he's been the center of attention. He is, and frankly, he is just Paul Morocco. And if you know him, you would understand the soul of Paul Morocco couldn't stop himself. He walks through the audience, which part like Moses and the Red Sea. He picks up the dog, brings it into the center of the audience, puts it there, and it's there stroking the dog. Also looking up at the audience and keeping there. Just hold on a bit. I'll finish the show. And he's just there. And what I like, I think it's Eddie Izzard. It might have been John Phoebe, but it might have. I think it was Eddie Izzard. And Eddie Izzard goes, "That is a dead dog surrounded by a dead show." Sort of thing. And I just. For some reason, it's one of the funniest things I've seen. That is a dead dog surrounded by a dead show. But Morocco was just...
Yeah, it's incredibly funny. But I see Paul's there, like, his mindset is on, I'm going to treat this dog well in its last moments. I'm going to give it some love.
No, I actually...
fuck the show.
No, I honestly think Morocco thought he could bring the damn thing back to life because the power of the energy of the show, of the goodwill of the audience were with him. And, I mean, if Morocco had been born 2,000 years ago, he'd have ended up nailed to a cross sort of thing because there's a sort of...
Well, the way the world's going, he might have an opportunity again.
He may have another one. He's a pretty messianic in his sort of beliefs, really. And, I mean, he is kind of a lovely guy. I mean, I have got on very well with these people. I'm just evil when I'm let loose.
So Rob, you've done your first show, okay?
Yes, we got £18,
£28, £8,
£18, which we're splitting.
£18, which is shared between two of you, so that's £9 each. So you've covered your bus fare. You've got a sandwich and a beer each at the end of the day. What's the second show like?
I think I think it went down. I think we had a crap time, but we kept. I mean, Eddie. I mean, like. Literally probably about 4 months ago I was chatting to him and I've said about something and he said, no, it's just, how we used to do on Come Gun, you just see a problem.
Well, that was sudden. I certainly wasn't expecting that. So it's back to us again. What I found quite interesting, so today I'm going to call Rob again. I'm hoping he's doing the same thing. So today I was researching, we talked about it a little bit earlier on, about this McLaren club, and as I look through, you see the faces inside this club, inside this grotty little club, which is next to Blackwall Tunnel, which if you don't know, if you don't live in the UK, Blackwall Tunnel is a very, very busy tunnel, and I think it's 4 lanes and it's constantly got traffic. Everything around it is covered in carbon. It's literally disgusting in terms of the filth that's laid around it. And this club there has TV stars of the time. It has pretty much a majority of the comedians who I love. And hey, buddy, I assume you're logging back in as we speak, yeah?
Say that.
Hey, buddy, I assume you got logged out again, yeah?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So are you logging back in now?
Okay, I'll log in.
Yeah, lovely mate. I'll fill time. That's right. So I like it's just like when we go back into footage, it looks a little bit like Rob's in the witness protection program. He's got lighting behind him, and it looks a bit like he's kind of not entirely. It's just a suggestion of that he's hiding his identity in case people might recognize him for a bank robbery in 1987. You know. So anyway, I'm looking at this club, this Martin McLaren club, and you're seeing all these incredible faces. You're seeing all these acts performing there that would perform in the future. You're seeing a lot of acts as well that were street acts at the time, performing this kind of variety stuff. And what I thought was amazing about that was you got this kind of melting pot. And in McLaren, he doesn't seem like he's good. Oh, hey, buddy. So we're going to have Rob back in right about... I'm putting that way. Right now. There you go.
Put another,
hey, how you doing? Welcome back. So your second street show.
Hang on.
Yes. So we're going to get some different lighting now. I found it absolutely incredible. The diversity of stuff and acts you saw in that place.
We were relying pretty much.
No problems. It kind of looks like you're in the witness protection program.
Although I spend my life fiddling around with lights, it drives my daughters mad. You know, I walk into a room and go, I don't know, the main lights are on, I'll just put on some subtle lighting, and I don't know, you know, because I was born by candlelight. What was it? Witness protection.
So you're second.
So I went down a bit, but I mean, you know, this is literally Eddie's philosophy, and he said this about 3 months, and he was like, you just keep working at it, and you try different things, keep trying that, and you know the way we kept trying stuff, and we kept trying stuff, and we kept trying stuff, and what he's saying about it, this is how you end up playing the Hollywood Bowl and outselling the Beatles in Madison Square Gardens, and I'm going, you're right, you're saying it's the same thing, and I'm sort of going, you know. And he's going, yeah, you just keep trying it, and you just keep working at it, and keep trying different things, and you gradually find out what works, and you know, and that's how you end up playing Madison Square Gardens and a Hollywood Bowl, and you go, no, that's how that's how I've ended up in Eltram, really, you know. So, but he would keep trying stuff. There was once I went away for about a couple of days. And when I got back, he'd completely written a whole new show, which we then tried and died like dogs. And he will sort of say, "Yep, we absolutely died like dogs on that one. It was terrible." And that it was, you know, I don't like the idea. People say, "Oh, I'm writing a new street show," and I actually don't believe you can write a street show. I think you accumulate it, and then you kind of organically keep using stuff. The biggest gag I had in my street show was on the knife throwing show. When you're going to throw a knife between the guy's legs, you give him a bucket to hold on in front of his groin. Now, by accident, because at one point we were doing the water evaporation, there was sometimes water left in the bucket. And on this one occasion, the bucket had slightly cracked. I put the bucket in front of this guy, and then he stood there, and then water started dribbling out of it, and everybody thought he'd pissed himself. It's a massive laugh. So, of course, you go, now that's a total organic thing. It wouldn't have occurred to me, you know, it doesn't make any fucking sense. If you pissed yourself, the piss would just stay in the trousers, it wouldn't fill a bucket in front of you. And, you know, certainly wouldn't happen straight away. But to the audience, they just went, oh my God, he's peed himself, you know, in some illogical way. And so subsequently, you know, by the end of my sort of street performing, you know, where I was still doing the knife throwing, you know, yes, the bucket I had always had a certain amount of water in it. It had a certain sort of type of tape on it, so that when you put it in front of the guy, it didn't start to happen. You would carry on the show, and then at a certain point, you would be doing stuff, and you go, and you'd point to the thing, at which point you knew that the water was then peeing out of his pants. You know, he looked as though, and that the audience would, oh my God, and then you had to carry on the show. So the audience is going, oh my God, look, he's pissing himself. And I'd be there going, and now, and I would have to play it as though I didn't know that there was piss dribbling out of this bucket, sort of thing. and that would be the biggest laugh. They would be laughing their bollocks off because I didn't know that this guy had pissed his trousers, had pissed in my bucket. And then you turn around and go, oh my God. Oh. And they go, because Roland has peed in my bucket. And when you took the bucket, you spray, the water went all over the audience as well. I think when we got, so we did really work at it. We kept working. We're trying different shows. For about 18 months, we were doing what we call the Bollocks show.
How many shows a week were you doing?
Eddie would do.
How many shows a week were you guys doing?
To do every day. After a while, because I had a partner, a girlfriend, I wanted a day off.
And so what year were you at when you guys?
That was
1985.
85. We were full time post 85. I had to go to Edinburgh for a show, to do the show in 85, to do an Edinburgh show for a month and then come back. And then we carried on.
But ostensibly for the next 2 years.
Next 2 years we
guys, so Eddie's doing every day.
No, we'd be double acting every day.
How many days are you doing a week?
I'd be doing the same as him.
Okay.
I mean, he just wanted to work all the time. And he'd be always wanting to do more shows. I mean, I was okay doing, as many shows as you like, but nothing like he would always be the one. We could go over South Bank and try and work there, and things. And he had a real work ethic, and he would be, we would work. We would take turns booking, phoning up to get gigs. So we were doing that during the day, and then we started doing the clubs, the alternative cabaret club stuff. Then, because it was much more alternative cabaret, it was called, rather than stand-up.
And so, did you do the street? Did you do the street first?
We did the street first,
the cabaret,
and then we started doing the comedy bollocks in venues and things.
And so, how long have you done the street until the comedy bollocks has gone into the venues? Are you doing a year, 6 months, a week, 5 minutes?
We were probably about. I mean, we just started. Doing it at the same time. I think we probably posts. So I did that summer show up in Edinburgh, and then from that September onwards, that's when we were trying to get into comedy clubs. And I seem to remember that we did the Comedy Store open spot, and we actually got booked from it. And I think we did that just before Christmas. Because the open spot was, you were going on at 2:30.
So you've been there about what, 9 months, something like that.
Yeah. And we were already trying to do other clubs and things, and doing clubs. And we were, I always remember Finborough Cabaret saying to us after we'd stormed doing a show there, and because it was the Finborough Theatre, and it had a sort of legitimate theatre on during the day, but it did cabaret late evenings. And the artistic director there would go, I find you guys very worrying. I'd be afraid that you would come out with a racist ad lib or something offensive to gays or transgender. So he's telling Eddie Izzard that he might come out with something offensive about transgender or transvesticism. And, you just really want to go, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about here, boy. You really don't, But it was just this kind of weird sort of world whereby we're very worried about your ad-libbing, as though we were suddenly going to come out with some, I don't know, and it's just, we really weren't, just, I don't know, it's just kind of, it was just all, we absolutely went with...
Was something of a worry at the time about ad-libbing? Was that something
we always ad-libbed, we always did crazy stuff in between routines. We were, Eddie would always be ad-libbing verbally. I'd always be ad-libbing doing something. I mean, Brian will tell you, we were once doing a show with the four of us together, and it's like the devil makes you do these things. Comedy makes you do these things. But they were going to pass fire clubs around Brian. I think Pete Milnerchek and somebody else. I don't really know. Can't remember the other person. And I'm standing there doing nothing. But for comedy page, Brian's standing there, and I can't resist just getting the fire extinguisher, breaking it out, and completely spraying Brian totally in foam, just head to foot covered in foam. For safety. And the audience is pissing themselves laughing. And Brian, to his absolute credit, just stands there stoically going, all right, okay, covered in foam. And then the guys pass the juggling clubs, and it's like this safety thing, because it was, and it was. But
it's something like a relish of the anarchic.
Yeah, but we always did the kind of how you follow something. That if if the audience does something, this is part of the white coating. If a member of the audience does something, if somebody walks through your picture, you have to be in charge, in my opinion, because you have to be the guy with the white coat saying, "It's all right, I'm in charge. Don't worry, carry on enjoying yourselves." It is back to Millet's experiment where you're demonstrating, I've got the white coat.
Do you think that has to be explicit?
The audience get it. If some guy walks through your show and obviously, go, see, I'm walking through your show, and you don't do anything about it, they go, oh, right, he's not very good. If somebody heckles you and you can't heckle them back, if, a bunch of French school kids start chucking snappers into your show, and you do fuck all about it, the audience just goes, I don't know, is he any good? I'm not sure.
So they can't relax. This, when we have Rumpold for...
Yeah. I mean, he's a law unto himself.
Yeah. Or Brian again.
Yeah, Brian. I mean, Brian. Brian has a very particular structure to his show. He always pretty much, he's actually stunningly professional. You wouldn't believe how well prepared his props are before he starts. Honestly, his props are absolutely, his case is perfectly laid out. Everything sort of set. I'm a nutball for that. As it goes in, so shall it come out. If you fucking put the prop in the wrong way in your pocket, it's going to come out shit. I'm in theatre shows. I will kill in a theatre show if people, fuck up a prop, handling. Really believe in prop wrangling correctly.
Well, that's so interesting because, look at the chap we mentioned at the start of this sentence is Rumpole. Now, I've watched Rumpole and I love the fact that he has no order, none whatsoever.
No.
His face went in as he picked up in a ball and put it in there.
Yes, I agree. There is always, there is something about the outlier always proves the theory. There is always the theory and there are always outliers.
Please carry on. I'm going to be back on screen in 2 seconds.
And I kind of believe that, if you don't have that kind of, that there are certain kind of rules, certain kind of, not rules, but structures, there is always somebody who's going to break the rules. By tradition, if you want to be a really good actor, you audition, you get into RADA, you train, you go and train classically, you do a bit of stint at the RSC, you do a stint at the National, you do a bit of all round there, and you find up a great actor. Or you're Derek Jacobi, and you don't go to any drama college, you're just fucking great. And you just happen to be God-given, born brilliant actor, which Derek Jacobi seriously is. I saw him doing Hamlet at the ripe age of 18, and it was never been bettered, really. And some people are just born, some people are just born, and Rumpole is just the outlier that proves it, you must know shows where you think that is a shit show, that is a generic crap piece of but it works really well. The audience kind of bloody like them. I could name lots and I'm not going to, and then the thing
I may call it, at least, I don't know how you feel about this, is that when I watch those shows that work, I personally find them quite boring.
Yeah.
Because I've spent, 15 years doing this. I look for those guys that don't do it the same way, that don't do it, don't make their lives easy.
Yeah. No, it's why we like Brian Reed. It's why you love people like Chris Lynham, who is just, sort of just insanity on legs, and I've never seen a more charismatic performer with the exception of Richie Rich, but Lynham is just like, he just, and in the theatre, honestly, he is genuinely scary. I saw him at the Hackney Empire, a completely packed audience, holding his explosive device. I don't know if you know his routine. He comes on, he goes, I've got a bomb, I'm feeling suicidal, I've got to end it all. And he mutters away. And this thing it lights this, looks like a huge stick of dynamite, and it's got a great fuse on it going, and it finally goes, and you go, fucking rubbish, Japanese fuse. Throws it. But honest to God, while he's yittering away, you seriously think, you know what? I know Chris does this routine, but one night that is going to be full of metal shrapnel. I swear to God. And he throws it up, and it is jam-packed with confetti, which just throws up in the air, explodes, massive explosion above the audience. It's not on the stage, it's above the audience. And then it just snows confetti for the best part of 4 or 5 minutes. And it's stunningly beautiful. But I swear to God, I think members of the audience are there going, do you think I'm not sure he's not going to kill us, because he's just has that about him, which is dangerous.
Plays it so sincere.
It's dangerous, and it's kind of, I don't know, he's believable. You believe he could. I remember going to see Iggy Pop, and he used to jokingly say at the start of Fun Time, and he would be standing on a huge mic stack, sticking microphones in, making the most appalling feedback you ever heard. He'd go, "We're going to have a fun time. Some of us might get killed." And you thought, it's an odds-on bet. Genuinely, I think Iggy Pop. Yeah, I think it could happen. And there is that about some people, and I would say that Richie Rich is that. You look at him, and he's insanely charismatic. I'm going to break the rule, and I'm going to say money about money. He, for donkey's years, I think for the best part of a decade, held the pitch record on Covent Garden, which was £480 in one show. A 40-minute show, he earned £480. About 2 hours later, he did another show, which was just under 320 quid. And I verified them because he wanted to say. So in an afternoon, he did a 480 show. So
you verified it because he wanted to be able to show off to everyone else.
No, he said, "What's the pitch record?" And we were sort of, I don't know, we didn't really know. And he sort of said, all right, check that. And I checked it over for him, and it was £480.
And was there a culture at the time of people talking about how much they earned to each other? Was that seen as like a merit, a badge of approval?
It was not. You just don't do it. I haven't been a street performer for the best part of 15 years. That's why I'm doing it. My record show was £308, and I did it on the 10 o'clock show on the inside pitch on a Sunday morning.
Wow.
£308 show. I used to desperately want to do the early morning, Sunday morning shows, 11 o'clock, 10:30, because honestly, I would nearly always earn over 200 quid on the show. My average was 150 to 200 pound shows. Honest to God, it's horses to courses. And I always thought one of the great shame about Covent Garden street performers is that they didn't go, yeah, you know what, Rob does those shows really well early. Actually, Pepe does those late evening shows fucking brilliantly. Dave absolutely should be on bang smack 12 o'clock. Dave, Dave, who's now in Australia, you all know Dave Evans. Absolutely lovely show. Should be on mid afternoon sort of thing. Paddy Bramwell's genius. He will pull out a show from nowhere, and actually, if he does a sort of 11:30, 12 o'clock show on the Piazza, he was great, and things. And it's always a shame that nobody ever just went, yeah, we could do it like that. And there was always. Basically,
the worry comes in with that is what happens when the people who aren't the greats want to be involved. When does your news?
There is room for them, but you need to make room for them when it's easy to do shows. I mean, actually pulling off a show, Paddy pulling off shows at 11 o'clock on a morning on the West Piazza is fucking hard. And he had
like a midweek morning.
He, certain weekends, and he would work. Away and just get it to work. And he was a kind of.
I will say this: you scoffed at me calling you a legend in the descriptions and in the beginning, but there's a number of people that when I was learning in Covent Garden, their stories were told, and Paddy was one. The thing of Paddy looking through the centre corridor and saying, if there's 5 people in there every minute, then you can do a show. Yeah, and another one was yourself. There were stories told about the way you would do shows, and that's why I describe it as legendary.
Most people tell the shit stories about me.
One they said was about, and it's not a shit story to say, but I thought it was quite clever. Is if there was lots of kids on the pitch and there was people in the bars who left their kids, you begin the show. So I was told by swearing a lot because some of the parents would come and pick up the kids.
No, you in my show there was a bastard. You said bastard. You know, what a bastard at the end of the show. And I actually would swear, because if you swear, the grown-ups go, this is a grown-up show. If you don't swear, if you don't have adult jokes in there, you know, jokes like, you know, oh, this rope is perfectly ordinary piece of rope, just like you'll find in your mum and dad's bedroom, you know, and, you know, you put in those stuff because the parents go, oh, I see, this is for us. Because they will give you, in those days, they would give you a pound coin, £5 note sort of thing. You know, God knows what they do now. But if they just go, this is for the kids, go and give the funny man 20p. Go. And that ain't how you make a living. You make a living by, you know, we once took a series of photographs of an audience, an average audience. We did it deliberately. And we then counted them. We put them all together. I think it was me and, it was one of the committee, Adrian Jordan Davis, the committee. And we just wanted to know, basically we were having an argument with the management about, you know, how many people watch shows, and we wanted evidence. So we photographed a few shows with an average audience where we took like photograph. We then put the photographs together and counted how many fucking people were in the show. And we worked out that the average show was about 500. So if you've got about 500 people, if you can convince 250 of them, you're worth £1. And that's 250 adults who are going to give you £1. You're in. Because everything else is, you know, somebody might go, I'll give them a tenner, I'll give them £5, I will give them 3 groats. You know,
I'll give them, they said 3 wooden balls.
So
why did you come to counting the shows? What situation was bringing up this kind of thought?
The management, because while we were there, the Greater London Council, which was Ken Livingstone's original kind of council of London, that was dissolved by Thatcher, who just fucking hated anything left wing and local government. So she dissolved that. And as a result, Covent Garden, which used to be owned by the Greater London Council, it was owned by the people, for fuck's sake, was sold to a private company. So I think it was Scottish Widows or someone, and, you know, and so they had then a management, so it's owned privately. And they, you know, initially went, let's get rid of all the street performers, don't need them, scurrilous warfare people. And that's where, you know, the SPA committee set up, was because that, you know, people like, I mean, I think.
So how did they introduce it to you? How did they tell you this was happening? Did they mention it? How did you? They would just, you know, say, we're going to close this pitch. We know we're no longer going to have street performers. We're not doing that. We're going to license you. So we don't want. What year is this?
I think that would be about 86, 86. If I had my iPad, I've got a better what's the name. I mean, other guys will quote me on, would know better, but I would actually guess that it would round about the sort of, it was during Thatcher's time, so we are from up to about around about mid to late 80s.
Was it 83 to 91 or something like that?
Yeah, and. She got in 79. You know, Jesus Christ. Wow. Yeah, I know.
But I'm a son of a cold, so I feel
the woman blighted my life, believe me. I was one of the first examples of her unemployment. When I was 11, I was the milk monitor. You used to get free milk, a free bottle of milk at school for every primary school kid. She got rid of it. And
I remember I was milk 84, so I remember because I couldn't drink milk. All the other kids have milk. I'd have a little
I thought you were much younger than this.
Oh, no, I was born in 84. Yeah, so I have the last memory, I think, of the milk in primary school. And I used to get orange juice.
Yeah. And, yes, certainly. There she goes, 1985. Yes, 86, 87. Paddy's quoting us. So that's when there was a bit where it went into something called London Residuary Body.
I'm really interested in. I really want to get the scene, and I want to get the social environment between you guys. So you guys all work on the pitch. You're queuing up. There's a crazy fucking 12 o'clock at night queue thing going on this time.
Yeah, that came in. Yes, and the van stuff where people.
Okay, so you've got this thing. Vans. Everyone's quite a bit of a community. You all know each other. Everyone's working. Seems like it's going to go on forever.
Yeah.
And do you guys, is there a bit of a hubbub between you all when the management changes, when GLA sold? Is there a worry? Are you guys aware of
it is, well, massively so, because I mean, in one way it got rid of alternative arts, which in my opinion was, great. I've nothing but loathing for them, and they were taken, and there was a guy who, he was actually just a manager, and he really just basically wanted to run it smoothly. And when you have a street performer coming in going, "You're a cat,"
you know what his name was?
And his name was Peter
Scott.
Was
that Peter Scott?
Yeah, and there was, Peter Scott, and there was an older guy who was like, squadron leader Fanshawe or something was the original manager. But I swear to God, he had the kind of squadron leader moustache, and he was just like,
this moustache?
Well, no, right to the sort of, like the going up, rather than yours is a Sancho Panza, the Zapata moustache. Yes, that's sort of like, yes, I had a good walk, that sort of thing. And I have no idea what his name was, but he wasn't there long. And Peter Scott was his deputy, and then Peter Scott became the guy. And Peter Scott was quite, we would have decent meetings. We would have committee meetings, and he would sort of explain, look, I just don't want you to get into, somebody had a fight with a member of the public 2 weeks ago. And you go, right, okay, yes, it would be good if, certain street performers didn't get punchy, shall we say. And
so when this was happening, was this just you guys as a body going like, all right, someone has to go to the meeting, your turn?
Yes. No, it was literally going, we just don't want these guys going to see Peter Scott, because they'll go in and call him a cunt again. And he'll go, I've had enough of these guys. Life is easier if I don't have a bunch of nutball street performers going apeshit at me and going apeshit at my staff. So we got together, and and it was me, Eddie, I think Adrian, I think Paddy might know who else. There was a woman called Patty, I want to say Webb? Smith, but I don't. Patty Webb. Yeah, I think so. There's Patty and Patty, I'm not sure if Patty Webb. Anyway, and they wanted to, and I think it might have been someone like Terry Sinclair was representing the musicians, who there was a bit of a sort of split between us because they were or were not allowed to use different pitches at varying times.
There was an amp band apparently at one point, wasn't there? And this is what Terry mentioned. Terry said there was an amp band which came in.
Yeah, there was an
amp band. And the amp band kind of created a two tribes kind of situation.
Yeah, at varying times. Because Terry was, used to play the West Piazza originally. And, he had this fantastic keyboard sound, like huge, he just sounded like the London Symphony Orchestra and stuff. And he was playing his own music. And, ludicrous bands. There was once a ban on live music, and Terry solved the problem by putting a tape on and miming. And actually no one could tell the difference. But he couldn't bear to do it. He was far too much of an honourable man. He just went, no, I feel as though I'm cheating them, so I'll stop. And he just started playing, off pitches. He couldn't play on the pitches because they banned live music for reasons surpassing understanding. It might have been the amp ban. They endlessly were banning fire at varying times. Now I'd be quite suspicious as to whether they would allow a knife throwing act on Covent Garden. I can't quite imagine.
Yeah, you would, because at least at this moment, Covent Garden is ran by the performers primarily.
Yeah,
we make the judgments on that call. Fire is even creeping back in.
Yeah.
But I suspect by next year that won't be happening because it's a change of policy. But let's not look forward now.
No,
let's look back.
The reason why the street performers are running the pitches is because of that committee. Because myself, Eddie, I think Adrian Jordan Davis, I think Paddy,
this is what's so interesting.
We wrote the Constitution. We wrote the Constitution saying.
But before we go on to what you did, can we just talk about So you guys, are you told that this is happening? Who comes out? Does Peter Scott come out and tell you? How do you find out?
Just that they, it wasn't Peter Scott who was going, I want to get rid of the street performers. It was the vice captain, whatever his name was. And in many ways, they were getting stuff down. Turner. Yes, it was. Say that name again.
Terry Turner. Thank Paddy, not
Turner.
Me.
Yeah, that's probably, it was before Peter Scott. Quite right. And he would definitely kind of, he was getting stuff down from the people who owned it, who were there going, right, we own this, fuck me, what shall we do with it? And at that time, all the shops were really quite peculiar, little quirky shops that were, paying, not huge amounts of rents in really inconvenient sort of stores, because they were built to be cold. The reason why you've got all those scratches on there's all things dug into the stonework on Covent Garden. It keeps fruit cold. Everything was built to make it cold. It's built in that direction to get the wind through it. It's deliberately built as a wind tunnel.
Does run through that market.
Oh, it fucking does, and it's deliberately done so in order that it kept all the fruit and veg cold, because that's what it was built for. That's why it's deliberately.
The joke is, it still does to this day, if I'm right.
It's what? Sorry,
I'm not sure who told that. It still does to this day, I believe, is the joke.
But it's a freezing cold place, and I think they wanted to get rid of us. So we basically, you do what you do.
But how did you find out? I mean, I keep labelling this, but I really want to fucking know if I can.
I mean, they would actually occasionally send us a piece of paper, and certainly they would tell people who went into the office for various reasons. I think they handed us a letter saying that it's now belongs to Scottish Widows or whoever it was that had taken over. And that we are considering the position of street performers, and you will all have to audition, because they wanted a sort of thing like, well, we'll audition you and we'll decide whether you're good, bad, or indifferent, because we want to get rid of some of the rubbish ones. We don't. You're good. You can stay. But it was a bit like, look, nobody starts good. Everybody has to start, and develop and get better. The Eddie Izzard, you keep working at it and you're going to get good. And we enshrine that as the absolute sine qua non. No quality control was the key phrase that was in the Constitution, that there is no quality control. And they were always wanting to bring in quality control. They were always wanting to go, well, what we'd like is like nice string quartets, and we'd like people sort of, I don't know, we'd like people juggling and not talking to the audience, and it was like, and actually the audience loved the rough and tumble come-down street performers. They want shows.
They want dressing for their markets. They don't want entertainment.
Yeah, they wanted
scenery.
Visual kind of wallpaper that moves, and we wanted to make a living. And to make a living, you do a show and you do a 40-minute show.
Well, not to make a living, but arguably, I'd say, not just a living, but you want to be able to choose what you do. That's what the choice of the street is. That you define your own work.
Well, the mad thing about the 80s was that everywhere, all over the bloody country, everyone was building shopping centres. They were building shopping centres everywhere, and everywhere was booking us, at 150 quid a day to go and perform in their shopping centres in bloody Tamworth. And they would dump you in the middle of somewhere, go, yes, do your stuff here. Because they'd come down, seen us on Covent Garden, and go, oh, they must be doing this, that's what they do. And then they would contact Alternative Arts, and Alternative Arts would send up the same old coterie of people they always sent up. Some of which were suitable, some of which were massively unsuitable for those sort of gigs.
But is this imagination that you're good, the crowds will come, even if we put you in the middle of the field in Plymouth? As
I said, let's put Ian McKellen in the middle of King's Cross Station and see how his King Lear goes down there. It's a you've seen there's a YouTube thing of a guy playing a Stradivarius, playing one of the most complex pieces of music, and that night he's going to be on at Madison Square Gardens, and tickets are $2,000 a pip. Nobody gives him $1 while he's playing a Stradivarius, an instrument that's worth millions, and he is the ultimate violinist. And it's humanity. We're not clever. We are a bit herdy, and we're a bit nerdy, and we're a bit turdy, he said.
We kind of have this thing about context, don't we? We walk around constantly, we try and, in a split instant, put something into a context. And so if you see a guy playing at the tube station, the context is wrong.
Yes. I mean, and it's, you kind of immediately want to be comfortable. So, if you see a nutball doing, blow and crack your cheeks, and it's Ian McKellen on King's Cross Station, you just go, nutball, it couldn't possibly be Ian McKellen.
Doesn't the alcoholic look a bit like Ian McKellen?
Absolutely, they do. Honestly, I swear to God, this is true. There was an actor, really well-known actor, during the 60s called Alan Bates. He's responsible for the Tristan Bates Theatre. That was his son. Alan Bates, very successful actor, major Hollywood actor, British Hollywood actor. And Alan Bates, there was this guy, and he looked like a drunky sort of tramp guy, and he was hanging around Covent Garden going, and really quite hunched up. And I was looking at him, and I sort of thought, fuck me, he looks like Alan Bates, he really does. And he was there for about a whole weekend, and after a while, I just went, oh, fuck it, I'm going to, you're not Alan Bates. And he just went, do you mind? I'm really sorry. I just wanted to, a bit of research. And off he went. 6 months later, there's a movie with him as a down and out. And he was literally researching it. Now, to everybody else, he looks like a down and out. He's Alan Bates. He's got an Oscar. No, he's nominated for an Oscar. He hasn't got one. But, it's that context is all, isn't it? If somebody starts running their hand up your leg and reaching up to the top of your trousers, you go, why, aye, unless you're going, why? If they are holding a tape measure and you're in a, gentleman's outfitters, no problem. Well, providing there's no cupping, as they say. It's context is all. And street performing is taking something out of context in some ways. Covent Garden has become contextualized. People know you go to Covent Garden, there's going to be shows. Slowly but surely, some venues, some places become contextualized. They become, oh yeah, no, I've seen statues here before. You walk along South Bank, there's going to be statues. There's going to be the odd band. There's going to be thing, but there's not necessarily going to be big circle shows. Sometimes,
can I supply a good example of this? I'd say it's one of the joys of my life is the Edinburgh Festival. Every year I feel a bit like a rock star. Because in context, you're something that's seen without question as worthwhile there.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a weird side to me which isn't predominant. That I've actually, I've been a member of the Labour Party for, I think just under 40 years. And actually I'm, really quite a devout socialist and actually quite a communist in reality. I actually do believe that the state should own everything, and that we are the state. We should own everything. What the fuck is a private company supplying our water for? The idea that broadband is now a privatized thing. It's insane. All these things should be state owned. They were built by the state. The only reason there's a national grid is the state built it. Why? Because private industry.
And now it's owned by the French state.
And it's owned by the French state. It's flogged off to this. The idea that you're going to have a nuclear power station that is basically run by the Chinese, and you go, you can't see a problem in this. It's a bit, I always think, the Second World War could have really gone badly because, the one thing the Germans wanted to buy was Spitfires. Nowadays, we just sold them, the fuckers. Jesus, the French sold our enemies Exocet missiles, and they're our allies, for God's sake. And we'd have sold the Germans Spitfires, and we'd all be going, Achtung, so, how is yours? Yes, that is good.
Is this a similar situation to selling Saudi Arabia missiles and at the same time condemning their actions in Jordan?
Of course, it's insane. The idea that that private industry and capitalism is functional is thing. And for me, on a personal level, the corollary of street performing is there is no better socialist element of performance. Anyone can watch street performing. You don't have to have money. You don't have to have a dress code. You don't have to have an accent. You don't have to. Anyone can watch it. When we mounted this Three Musketeers show, a big sort of really very sizable show, and we ran it for a month on Covent Garden with Three Musketeers.
Before we go on to that, just I feel like, we've talked. We said so many interesting things now. We're 2.5 hours in. So many.
Paddy Brown.
We can talk as long as you want. We have 4 hours as a maximum for this. I'm happy to talk as long as you want.
No. I'm fine to be shut down. Honestly, you're
right. No, I'm not shutting down. I'm fascinated. Genuinely, I'm fascinated. Your Three Musketeers show, is the breakthrough street show. Am I right in thinking that's when?
When we switched to sword fighting, because we were earning, at best sort of 40. We were earning sort of at best 60, 70 pound shows when we were doing the comedy bollocks. Between two of us, not much. We were, so our average show was a 50 odd pound show. But we were doing a lot of shows. We were working every day. So pretty practically. And when we switched to sword fighting show, me and Eddie, I mean, the money shot up. I mean, you know, our average became £90 shows, and we went into the.
Was the audience response different?
Yeah, they absolutely have a conviction. I mean, our sword fighting was really vicious and really kind of, you know, looks really skilled, and it was a very funny show. It had less laughs in it than the comedy bollocks show. Honestly, Eddie counted them. Oh, seriously, he counted them, and not only he counted them, he also had, you know, big laugh, murmur, sort of a laugh, round of applause plus laugh. You know, he had a whole category sort of thing. And he did the comedy bollocks show, and he said, yep, there are actually more laughs in that show, less laughs in this sword fighting show, but we're making a hell of a lot more money because it's perceived as skill you get money for. You know, it's one of the issues that I would say is Brian Reed's problem, is that it's very difficult to perceive how skilled he really is, you know, because he is playing that postmodernist thing of going, I'm not skilled at all. And in actual fact, he's all right at most things. He's not a bad diabolist and that sort of stuff. He's
all right at most things, but also the writing with Brian. I mean, we talked about Brian a lot during this interview, but the writing with Brian is so subtle and beautiful.
Yeah.
And unless you're paying attention to it, you don't get it.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a... the Coke can on the puppet Coke can is such a fantastic piece of postmodernist humour, you know, whereby you all are expecting a puppet. He's picking this up, and out comes this stupid Coke can, clank, 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 and he goes, yeah, American culture, you know, and it's playing with, it's saying to the audience, I know what you're expecting, you know what you're expecting, and I'm surprising you by not expecting. Postmodernism is about admitting the medium. And, you know, one of the great things about street performing is we admit the medium. We're going back to before 175 years ago, where suddenly the fourth wall came down, where we are no longer, you know, playing to, you know, we're still talking to the audience. We still admit they're there. Whereas in theatre, you don't admit they're there. And I think that's a shame. I think, you know, you don't talk to the audience anymore. You don't admit they're there, and I think you're being a bit rude. And the theatre we used to do, we always admitted they were there. We played with them. We got them to do stuff in the show, in theatre, and you do that, and it's a stunning energy. You know, that's why something like Shakespeare, complete works of Shakespeare, lightly cut, ran for, I don't know, best part of 8-9 years in the West End, selling out.
Has Shakespeare played to this day with that response, or has Shakespeare been kind of readdressed into the
Shakespeare's been taken into the sort of naturalism. It's called naturalism, whereby, you know, it looks as though you're naturally just being normal. It's usually attributed to Stanislavski. It's not actually, he got it from somebody else. He got it from a German guy. That's what my MA was about. My master's degree was about the original inventor of naturalism, who was basically written out of history because he was a German. He's the first stage director. His name's Ludwig Kronig. He was in a place called Meiningen, and they did some extraordinary things there, and he is probably responsible for naturalistic acting. And the reason why he's written out of history is because the history really didn't get written up till the late 20s, early 30s, and Ludwig Kronig is Jewish. So he's been written out of history, but he's actually one of the most important sort of people in historical history, in theatrical history, because when he put on a production, Stanislavski went to see the production. Not only did he see the production, he also went to see how Kronig rehearsed the actors. So Stanislavski sees it. He says, this is, you know, 6 months later, him and Dachenko write the history of how to be naturalistic acting in, you know, the studio method of acting. He comes to Britain. He comes to Meiningen Theatre comes to Britain. They do the same here. All the British actors go, we're going to do it like that from now on. And it goes to France. Artaud sees it, goes, we're doing it like that. So this one Meiningen Theatre company, and the reason why I know this is that's where the first place I was asked to direct a show. So I was asked to direct a show at Meiningen Staatstheater.
Is that indicative of, do you think, of a broader trend throughout society? Because you have that in music as well during this era, is that music stops being, let's gather around a piano and sing, and it starts being, we listen to the greatest person
to somebody else. Well, when we were going through the 70s, basically, you didn't fucking make music as a person. You listened to progressive. As a student, as a school kid, I listened to progressive rock. So I was listening to things like Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Now, Emerson, Lake and Palmer used to perform with a piano that could rotate a person upside down while he played it. Carl Palmer had a drum kit that they used to have a guy with a welding gear permanently with them in order to weld it together all the time. And Greg Lake, who was short of, just a bassist guitarist, just used to, the only thing he could do to be excessive is have an antique Persian carpet to stand on stage on. They were loaded. And we're going to make our new concept album in Montserrat, and we're going to spend 6 months recording. And all that got flushed down the toilet when punk came along, who said, get an electric guitar, get an amp, get in a garage and start playing with the 3 chords that you do know. And you don't need a fucking orchestra. You don't need 6 months in a really expensive studio. And you don't need the London Philharmonic to do backing for some of your orchestra, for some of your bits. And suddenly it democratized music. And you could be in a band. And that's what I got into. Initially that was my first performance, was being a drummer in something which was basically a new wave band. And that it democratized it. It stopped it being the purvey of student musician, musical students and, the university. I mean, they're, lovely, gorgeous guys that they are, but people, Genesis came out of a university, Queen were guys from all at university. Not that my band wasn't a bunch of university students. We were all at Sheffield University. But, and that is, quite a tradition.
Is the parallels with street performance in this liberation of the medium? That you can go on the street, you can do what you want. Obviously, the crowd dictates the limits, really, in the end. But
yeah, there's a lovely film which I would recommend called I think it's called Charing Cross Road, and it stars Charles Lawton, and it is about a guy. Charles Lawton is a street performer who plays to the queues in the West End, which is, of course, where the traditional sort of street performers used to do. You'd do stuff to the way, and he's there going, "There's a little golden eye in the eye of golden God," and he's doing Kipling poems and it shows really early street performers in the film. They are really are street performers from like the 30s and 40s, people playing to the queues. Charing Cross Road, recommend it. Quite a good film anyway. Charles Lawton, he's always good. And in many ways, by tradition, it was the down and out kind of, lower strata of society who found they could make some money by, instead of just begging, they actually entertained, and the deal was on. Instead of begging, there was an exchange. I entertain
if I give you a
you
contemporary example, there's a guy who quite clearly looks like he's a heroin addict in Central London, who I've watched over the last 8 years, mentioned him in podcasts before.
Yeah.
He plays a traffic. He's sitting, goes,
yeah, plays traffic cones. Yeah. I've seen
into a traffic cone.
Yeah.
Well, I've watched him over the last 6 years develop his craft to the point where I find his humming into a traffic cone quite haunting.
I like the idea one day he'll be there at Ronnie Scott's with his traffic cone. Okay.
Well, believe it or not, I had a friend who did the radio station.
Sorry?
And he wanted him on the radio station.
Yeah.
And I went and asked the guy, I said, "Will you go on this radio station?" And the guy just tried to me, "No, man, not my thing."
Yeah.
And it's like, "Oh, you're too underground for it." I get it,
Yeah. I mean, there is an image of, I've always liked Chris Adams, who was the old, Alex and Chris Adams.
Yeah.
I mean, when I first started there, and I was talking to him, and I said to him, and he was doing these great shows, him and
was he the Mendeeses before?
He was in the Mendeeses. Yeah, Chris Adams was in the Mendeeses. So he was Mendeeses, and then Mendeeses split up, and he took on Alex, and they formed this stunning juggling act. I mean, really good. And I remember saying to him about, God, don't you want to, the things you could do with the show, you're so good, you could go on and you could do television. And he goes, I don't know, I like doing Covent Garden, I like doing street shows, it's good, and he was genuinely a man happy with his medium and with what he was doing. He was doing the best you can probably possibly do on Covent Garden. Their show was stunning, and it was huge, and it made the money, and and he was fine, and they were doing all right, and he had no great desire to go, I must go on to this, and I kind of always admired that. Myself, there's some need for me to get in front of people and be loved, by cold calculating audiences who are never going to love you, and that was 4 years of psychoanalysis, and in the end I realized I didn't actually have to be a performer, an actor, that actually I like being a writer, I enjoy being a director, it's the best job in the world. And that,
so before we get on to your directing stuff, the Three Musketeers, of which there's two of you, which is a confusing title in and of itself.
Yes, that was the whole thing. Three Musketeers, comedy double act. What happened is Eddie and I went we were doing a Channel 4 show called it's called Comedy Wavelength. And it was a Channel 4 attempting to find new writers. And they picked us up when we were doing Banana Cabaret. They got me and Eddie in. And in their infinite wisdom, they said, Eddie, you are not a comedy performer. Rob, you are a comedy performer, but you're not a writer. Whereas Eddie, you're a writer, you're not a comedy. You can never be funny in front of audiences. And Rob, you can't really write, but you're a funny performer. And and you just go, fair enough.
How funny, eh?
Of course. They also told Paul Merton he wasn't funny. Paul Merton was in it because he did the warm-up show and was the host. And the commissioning guys saw the first show, and Paul Merton by far was the funniest thing in the show. And in those days, he was Paul Martin, and he had to change his name to Paul Merton because there was already a Paul Martin in Equity. So he had to change his name to Paul Merton.
Why was he the funniest though?
Why was he
the funniest guy in the show? Yeah, why? Because
he was doing his well-honed act and comparing, and he's really good at ad-libbing and improvising. Whereas we were doing sketches, which were pretty much kind of slightly substandard kind of Monty Python sketches. So they were getting people they'd seen doing comedy. So they got to sort of...
Is that you and Eddie working on this?
That was me and Eddie. They saw me and Eddie at Banana Cabaret wowing an audience. They said, come, we'd like you to come and do this sketch show on Channel 4. And we go, okay. At that point, Eddie was going, yeah, okay, no problem. And we went in there, and then they sort of go, right, okay, well, you're the funny performer, Rob, and you're a writer. So Eddie could go and write anytime, whereas I was then in rehearsing during the week. So Eddie couldn't actually do our double act. So Eddie was going, I can't work, I can write. And now Eddie wrote sketches for that show, which are, to this day, really funny. He's, there's a whole sequence he does about chasing the Scotsman, about, when I was young, I used to do Frosties and I occasionally used to do porridge and, snut porridge and you'd get caught chasing the Scotsman, and it was just, and there was a whole comedy routine. He wrote that as a sketch for thing, and it was done by Nick Revel originally on the show, because Eddie wasn't a funny performer, can't perform comedy, that man, well-known fact. So there's Nick Revel doing Eddie Izzard sketch.
For a living, is Eddie being paid to write? Are you guys getting paid equally? Or?
Yeah, I'm getting paid to perform. He's being paid to write. We rapidly kind of realised the show wasn't great, and there was, we met some lovely people, like Josie Lawrence was in it, and she was lovely. Met some very nice people. And Paul Merton.
How was it for your friendship and for your working relationship?
It's completely split us up. It completely split us up. That's when the double act split. I think it was over that. In fact, Eddie will say that because I'd been doing these TV and I'd been on every sort of day rehearsing this sort of TV thing, and then we recorded, I think we did 2 weeks rehearsal, and then we did a recording of 2 episodes, and then you did 2 weeks rehearsal and recorded. And I wanted a bit of a holiday, so I went off on holiday, and Eddie was left on Covent Garden for, I don't know, over a weekend or something, and he borrowed some chains off Paul Keane, Captain Keno, and did an escape act and took some advice from Keane, which he still cites. I mean, you'll hear Eddie Izzard saying, Paul Keane, this guy said, to escape, you've got to believe you can escape. So when you see Believe Eddie Izzard, the Eddie Izzard life story, and when you see Believe Me, Eddie Izzard's autobiography, it's from Paul Keane saying, you've got to believe you can escape. If you don't believe you can escape, you'll never get out, And Eddie, found that actually he was making, pretty decent money, having never done an escape show from chains before. And I went solo, and I was a bit sort of like, oh, holy fuck. And I sort of carried on doing my show single for a bit. And then
before we go on to this, did you have a difficult conversation? How did you guys deal with it? It's difficult. You guys have been together since you were kids.
No, we've been together since meeting in Sheffield, so since students sort of thing.
But as a 35-year-old now, I describe 18-year-olds as kids.
Yeah,
sure you.
Yeah, we were young, and I don't remember it being acrimonious particularly. And actually, in my head, we used to. We were terrible arguers with each other. We really would. And there's a classic sort of, and actually I use it as an example. There was a whole thing about sword fighting. We used to do this quick comedy routine with a banana, whereby he would hold up a banana and I would go cut the banana with the sword. Now, you wouldn't think it's that difficult, but it is. And about 1 in 5 times I would hit Eddie's hand with a sword. Now, he's wearing a leather glove, but nonetheless it fucking hurt. He's holding a banana, sizable banana, you'd have thought, sizable banana, and I can't hit the banana. I keep hitting his hand every now and then. So he goes, can't we change it? Why don't we do an apple? Throw an apple into the air and cut the apple into. And I'm going, Eddie, I can't hit a fucking banana, which is twice the size of an apple, when you're holding it still. You think I can throw an apple in the air and cut it in half when it's flying through the air and it's half the size of a fucking banana? And we argued solidly for the best part of 3 hours. And he was just going, just try it, just try it, just try it. And I said, look, I'll show you. Threw the apple over, completely cut it perfectly in half, an apple. In theatre. Try it. Honestly, the amount of bollocks actors and performers talk, and if you try it, sometimes it works a fuck of a lot better. Rehearse the scene, try the bloody scene, and somewhere along the line, Pete Milnicek will come out with the funniest line in the fucking play. I ain't afraid of hanging, when he's just ahead. It's symbiosis, and it's just, magic,
giving into the moment kind of thing.
Yeah, it's organically trying stuff, and if you do that, sometimes you get a much better gag than going, I've written this gag, it works brilliantly. And street shows are about organic stuff. You find what works for you. You can watch the guy get on his high unicycle, juggle a chainsaw, and eat an apple and all the stuff that's standard stuff, and you can do exactly the same, and it won't work at all. And when Richie Rich does it, it's 480 quid, and next guy goes out and it's fuck all, because for some reason there's just, my show is not, was never, I think a lot of people rightly think my show's quite aggressive. I used to do this thing, which, in many ways is quite problematic. But, if it's this guy did not do it, join in. And I would go up to the guy, put my hands on his face, and kiss him on the mouth. Not anything, just really, really quick. Now,
herpes wasn't as much of a public concern back then.
No, nothing at all. Now, technically speaking, an incident cropped up in a theatre where I did that because this guy had been a complete twat. Paddy will remember it. And in actual fact, years later, the police wanted to see me on a sexual assault charge. And I actually did that twice in every show for the whole of 18 years, or the whole of, I don't know, everything, where I do this kiss routine and I bet he does it now. And if he doesn't do it, and you go back to the guy, and you wouldn't kiss him again, but because you were rolling your tongue around, everybody go, oh yes, we'll cheer, shout, applaud, and it was quite, in many ways quite aggressive, and I, well,
Brian reads this quite well. He said the taking of a kiss gag, derivations of, are rape gags. They're gags
he has a point. I mean, believe me, I know a woman, someone I actually went out with years later who said, "Oh God, this guy did this awful thing to me. It's horrible. I've always hated it." And actually, not only did she say it, but she also actually said his name was Pepe. And you go, "Oh right, yeah, I know him." And I mean, just some people think, what's the name? I remember the kiss, the squeaky cushion was the, in a Three Musketeers show. The funniest gag was like stupidly, I would arrive with, it's just so contextual, it really is. But I would arrive with a squeaky cushion. Paddy's put it up with a squeaky cushion, and I go, but I bought a cushion and everything to see the king. I was a musketeer going to see the king. Look, listen. And it would add a squeaker on it, and it would just bring the house down. And it was not written into the show. It was never a part of the show. And there are lots of stuff that when you keep doing a show, you find things in a theatre show that work. We would in the first week we would try different stuff. And my God, if a scene wasn't working, we'd fucking get back in there on the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and we would work it. And until such time as it did work, or we chucked it, we would keep changing. And so for the first week of, we would open on the Thursday. We'd have done a couple of public, audience public shows on the tech and the dress, and we would have a thing by the first week, and then we would lock on the first weekend, and that's when the review, if you've got any down in Croydon, the reviewers would be in, and they would see what we considered the locked show. But we would. Rob, yeah,
just in the chronology of your story.
Yeah.
You've now reached a point where you're the funny guy. You're being recording, you're acting, and Eddie was writing. And there's a what's in this story so far has been a double act. It's been a two-parter.
Yeah.
It seems like this is now separates. Your story is changing from now.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is, when we were on Covent Garden, we were working Covent Garden, and the Vicious Boys had left Get Fresh to do a different show. And so Get Fresh started, there's a producer of the show. It had switched from being Janet Street Porter to this other guy, much lovelier guy called Mike Forte, a real great bloke, actually. And he saw me and Eddie working Covent Garden, and he went, "We want these guys." So he contacted us, got in touch. And me and Eddie had a discussion, and Eddie's going, "I'm not doing children's television. Well, you just get stuck in children's television. You can't get out of children's television. If you do children's television, you're stuck forever in children's television. I'm not doing it."
You tell Dick and Dom that.
Sorry?
I said, you tell Dick and Dom that.
Yes, this is true. Well, Dick and Dom. Okay, the reason why I'm going Dick and Dom. Basically, so by the time... it took 6 months for this show to get its shit together, because TV takes a long time. And they got back to us. Me and Eddie had already split up, and I'd already got a new partner. I got this other guy I knew from Sheffield, who'd been a year below, but he'd been singing. And we were now doing the sword fighting show. We were doing a new sword fighting show. And it was a very funny show, our sword fighting show. And this guy's called Richard. Yeah. And so by the time TV, Get back to us, I go in there and, they go, "Yes, we'd like you. You're a double act." Poor old Mike Forte didn't realise, actually, he nearly had Eddie Izzard. In actual fact, he ended up with me and Richard. And we did a series of Get Freshies. And we were like the live act comedy. It was live in a park. It was the thing with Gilbert the alien. I don't know if that rings a bell. And that was the show. And it was, and we did quite a lot of those. And then that ran in summer. In winter, you had Motormouth. And we were doing Motormouth on Sunday, where you're just doing comedy sketches again. And we were actually auditioned to be the lead turns, to actually be the presenters. And in that, beautiful. I mean, they didn't go. I've got to tell you the audition. Sorry, who they didn't go for. Who they did go for was a guy. Just hysterical, really. In actual fact, one guy was the guy who is Art Attack, and he's a lovely bloke and very professional. Really Neil Buchanan, really nice guy. I sat next to him in the show, in the green room, and he said, "Oh, I'm thinking of doing a show, like the art things on Vision On." And I said, "Really? That sounds a bit old-fashioned. I don't think that will ever catch on." Art Attack is what you're talking about. It's made him millions. It really has, because he's franchised all.
So what year are we looking at here now? Are we like 89, 87, 88?
I wish I've got this timeline on my iPad. But
you can guess if you like, but it's okay. Paddy will
I'm sure. Yeah, someone will sort of get. We did Get Fresh, and then we were doing Motor Mouths, and these were children's television, and there was a point I do distinctly remember I was coming back we were being flown back from Glasgow, and we were the TV company. We were late, but they held the plane because we were the TV company. And we got on the plane, and we were all dashed on, and we all got the wrong seats. And I was sitting next to this very pretty young girl, not young, this very pretty girl, who'd been a singer in a band that had been on the show. And I think the band was called Big in Japan. I don't know. And she's a very pretty girl. And I'm just sat next to her and go, were you on the show this morning? And she, yeah, well, I'm the singer with the band. Oh, right. Which band were you in? You know, and she'd go, I'm in the band Big in Japan, which, you know, and I'm there, right, jolly good. I'm just the comedy guy, really, you know, I don't know. And I said, and she said, oh, we were the second one. We did the last song. And I said, oh, I've heard that song before. And she went, yeah, it's been number one for the last 4 weeks. And I realised how completely I had no fucking idea about young people. And that, you know, those children's shows were about peer, you know, hey kids, I love this is great, you're really gonna like this band, I saw them last night when I was boogieing down a club shop. I'm jovial uncle going, oh really, and this pop band is apparently doing very well in something called the pop chart, don't you know? Gosh, isn't that excellent? And they're very popular with you young'uns, you know. I'm jovial uncle, and it's peer pressure era, you know. Jovial uncle was Blue Peter. Now era is peer pressure, and it's, you know, your peers with them, and I just realised I'm out of it. And I about a week later, I'm walking on Tooting Beck Common. I climb a tree because I've just seen Dead Poets Society, and if you don't know what to do, stand up high, see. And I decide what I've always meant to do is get famous and do theatre shows. That's what I want to do. Get famous, do theatre shows. That's what I want to do. And I realise I'm just doing more and more children's television. And it's, you know, it's making a lot of money. You get paid shitloads for it. And I'm also doing street performing and this sort of stuff.
I'm told this thing in, just a quick thing. I was told by a friend that children's TV presenters will stab you in the eye with a pencil to get a gig ahead of you. It's quite brutal.
Neil Buchanan was a prince amongst men. He's an absolute charm. Charlotte, I can't remember her second name. Charlotte, who did Get Fresh, and she also did Charlotte. I don't know. I can't remember. But if you looked her up, blonde, very pretty, lovely woman. You know, really nice.
Palmer? Not the lady.
Oh yeah. Oh no, not Covent Garden. No, this is completely. You know, it was a presenter on Get Fresh and then Motormouth and things, I think. Yeah. But there were some guys. Yeah, you know. I mean, the audition, who they turned down. As well as turning down us, they turned down Malarkey and Myers, i.e. Neil Malarkey and Mike Myers, for fuck's sake. Yeah. They turned down Mike Myers. And you know, Mike Myers and Neil Malarkey's Cambridge Footlights, unsurprisingly. Mike Myers was, you know, Second City Firsts, and he was sort of, you know, Chicago impro guy. And he came over to Britain and was working in Britain with Neil Malarkey, doing a really funny double act. And they were Malarkey and Myers, and they were actually doing Dr. Evil. They brought it down to Covent Garden for a competition, and we beat them. I have beaten Mike Myers and Neil Malarkey in a comedy competition. And that was me and Eddie beat them in that. Or it might have been me and Richard, I can't remember which. But we you know, it's quite funny. I mean, they were obviously not Mike Myers as we know him now.
Yeah, they weren't great street acts. They were kind of...
No, they were really good club acts. No, they were really good club acts. Their indoor cabaret show was really funny. I mean, hilarious. I mean, really... a real treat. Not stand up at all, just really funny routines and things. They had a lovely routine called the Ghost.
So Rob, you're sick of doing children's TV.
Yes,
just keep doing children's TV.
I'm not sick of doing children's TV. I realise I'm in the wrong place. And I decide that in actual
What do you mean by you're in the wrong place? Is that you want to do theatre?
I want to do. I actually meant to do theatre. That's what I meant to do. So it's a bit like just bloody do theatre. Don't becoming famous. I don't know. You don't. You seem to be just doing more children's television, and it's driving you mad, and it's nutball stuff. And you mean to do theatre, start a theatre company. So I just go. I'm starting performance theatre company.
Were you not before we go? Were you not having fun doing the? Were you having fun doing the children's TV, but it just wasn't? It wasn't what you wanted to do.
It was enjoyable in terms of getting a lot of money. It was enjoyable in terms of hotels and things. The material was. I mean, I would quite like the material. What you would get is you'd get a brief, and the brief would be, okay, this week we want 3 sketches. One is 1 minute 15 seconds, one is 2 minutes 45 seconds, and one is 2 minutes 25 seconds. We want three sketches, and the theme is spies. So we then come up with 3 sketches based around James Bond or something, or 3 spy sketches, and because you're doing, the first one is a James Bond sketch, where you walk in doing the James Bond eye, the gun barrel. I've done that, and they get you the perfect white dinner jacket that is tailored for you. They get you've been using a perfectly good prop gun for the rehearsal. They get you the James Bond Beretta proper gun. Exactly the right gun that James Bond had. They get you the Polar, they get you, and they set up the thing, and you see yourself, and you're doing down, and you're doing the James Bond thing, and then you turn around and you go, and then the camera wobbles and drops down dead, and you go, and then Blofeld leans in, you seem to have shot the cameraman, Mr. Bond, and if you come up with an idea, they get it for you. So we had an idea which involved a prop which cost £500 for the prop. And because it's television, they didn't want to take a chance. You'll do one in rehearsral, you'll do one in the actual show, it's a live show, and we'll have one just in case. The £500. So they spend £1,500 on a gag, on a prop, which is an inflatable dinghy, one of these dinghies you just pull and they just inflate. It wasn't a great gag. And ironically enough, when Neil Buchanan saw it, he said, "You know what? Well, we did exactly the same sketch about 8 years ago in another show," and he showed us the thing, and you go, yeah, it's the same gag. But it was like that. Television's that sort of thing, whereby they will get everything you want. So you go. So we're thinking of pumpkins. We want a pumpkin this big, and we want a pumpkin that is eventually that big. We want a pumpkin that is 4 foot big, and so they make you a pumpkin that's 4 foot big, and they get you.
Why does Rob not at this point think I can make theatre out of this? Why does Rob go to the theatre instead of trying to?
Because don't fuck around. Theatre is. I'm going to give you two. Yeah. Television is like alcohol, okay? You get stand-up, and I'm saying it may be a bit like honestly, I don't know drugs. I've always been shit at drugs. I've never done any. I'm really a wuss. And get a stand-up, and I don't know. Maybe it is a bit like smoking dope. Theatre is mainlining heroin. It's straight into the human heart like a fucking freight train. It is direct into the heart and to the brain. That's what theatre does. It doesn't fuck around. It's the people in front of you. That's why it works. That's why it's a medium that is so strong. And that's why I don't know what's going to happen to film, but I know what's going to happen is that in the same way that, look, you can record film and you can't copyright the fucker anymore. It's too easy to download it. Where do you make the money if everyone can keep downloading your film? Did you ever notice that every time
3D specs, seen in the studio, seen in the theatre, 3D, you smell-o-vision.
It's the same with Popmans. Because you can't copyright your music, stop people downloading your music. The only place you make money is live, is your live performance. And theatre is live performance. So it's literally is the heroine of entertainment. That's why it works. Did you make Mike Myers funny?
Mike Myers is insanely funny anyway, and it was only like, this is Bobo Roberts. I don't believe your name is Bobo Roberts, and if it is, you really ought to change it. My name's Rob Ballard, and I can't bear Bob Ballard, So, did you make Mike Myers funny? No, Mike Myers really funny. He and Neil Malarkey, really funny act. Neil Malarkey was Footlights and that sort of thing, and they were very nice chaps. They were really friendly. Mike Myers, just wasn't known, and he knew that there was a point where Malarkey and Myers were doing pretty well, and they were doing quite well in Britain. And then Mike Myers got asked, would he audition for an improv group, which was the main improv group that they picked up Saturday Night Live people from. And so he, how do you resist that? So that's why he went back to Canada, did an audition for Saturday Night Live, and that's how, Mike Myers became Mike Myers with Wayne's World and all that sort of thing. It was all sketches and Dr. Evil was a sketch in that he used to do on his cabaret, and Neil Malarkey teamed up with Nick Hancock, as Malarkey and Hancock were a double act for a bit. Don't know what happened to them. I know Nick Hancock's knocking around, sort of thing, comedian guy and stuff.
So Rob, I'm interested in your personal transition from kids TV, as it appears to me at this moment, just from the way the story's been told. You went from kids TV to theatre? Is that
yeah. I started a theatre company and just went, I'm going to do the least technical thing I'd ever done was a show called Three Men in a Boat, which is the old Victorian book, which is very funny, doing it a promenade. So you don't need a theatre, you just need a hall. I had an idea.
Can you explain the old Victorian book? As I said, I'm a cultural idiot. Yeah.
Okay. There's the most popular book of the Victorian age is called Three Men in a Boat. It's by a guy called Jerome K. Jerome, who actually, in his lifetime, he was kind of slightly better known as a playwright. But he wrote this book, Three Men in a Boat, and I promise you, I swear to God, Matt, read it. It's insanely funny. It really is a funny book, even now. It's beautifully funny. It's really charming, and it's just about three guys who get boats and sail up the River Thames. That's all it is, and there's the things they do, and they just have a lovely turn of phrase. I can quote stuff from it, and it's like Harris said one day, "Do you think if I was to turn over a new leaf and become Prime Minister or something, do you think they'd put up plaques in the pubs that I went to? What, you mean Harris had a Scotch cold here in 88? Yes, Harris was chucked out of here in 1842. Maybe. Harris was thing." And then somebody goes, "No, Harris, it would be the pubs that you never went to that would become famous. Only pub in South London where Harris never had a drink. People would flock to see what would possibly be the matter with it." And it's just like, it's beautifully funny. It's really well written, and we did a stage adaptation whereby,
So it's a lovely thing about contrast in that, right? Is that there's the contrast of the two different terms that have been used. This presidential glory, and then the piss in the pub.
Yeah, it is honest to God, it is a classic of British comedy, of English comedy. It is one of the funniest books in the English language, and I do honestly recommend it as a very funny book. It contains nothing of import. It's just funny, and it's very charming. And it's these Victorian guys in the centre of the British Empire, rowing up the River Thames, and the sort of stupid things they do.
And so back to focus back on yourself. You've left this kids entertainment thing, and you've wrote this play before. Am I right?
I'd done it as a student, and then we did it. And then when we started, we did one little dry run of it where Adrian, who was a street performer, came in, and then Paddy had been away in Australia, and then Paddy came in, and Paddy, me and Adrian kind of took it up to Edinburgh. We did a really successful run up in Edinburgh. Honestly, we sold out this venue in Edinburgh constantly. We won an award. Actually, Paddy sort of slightly sorted out the award for us, but we won an award, and we made money. And
so did you rent the venue? Did you put the money out for the venue?
Yeah, no, we rented the venue, rented the space. We rented the space.
Was that scary?
Yeah, of course it was. Yes, because it's always my own personal money. I mean, when we did the Three Musketeers on Covent Garden, I mean, everybody, Jesus fucking Christ. On the opening night, I was out £10,000. I'd spent £10,500 on the opening night, on getting all the stuff set up and things. And we were only doing it on pay as you exit, i.e. contribution at the end of the show. And and we did it for a month. Yeah, and on one night, the show took £1,200 one night, and on other nights it took £400 or £500, and it was knackering, and it was stalwart, and it was 12 street performers and two actors. I think we had in it 12 street performers otherwise, all doing a big show. Started at 7 o'clock.
This wasn't buying yourselves new houses. This was for the project.
This was because it could be done. Because I mean, we actually voted. The SPA supported it. It had to be voted in favour of, and it got voted for it. But there were some performers who just fucking hated us for doing it, because they were going, "Oh, this is my show," because we would go on at 7 or 7:30. I think we were on at 7 or 7:30, and we would have to stop the pitch at 7 o'clock to set up this huge ramps and scaffolding and set up a sound system. And
is that to dry run it? Are you setting stuff up at this point to dry run it and to figure it out for the Edinburgh run?
No, not at all. This was just to do it as Covent Garden. Originally, it was round the millennium, and there was a massive fund to do projects for the millennium. And here was me going, hey, if they, I put in for funding to get it, and I thought we would be a cinch for funding, because look, we are doing a show for free for anybody in this Covent Garden. You pay whatever you want, pay as you earn. It's not a pay as you leave exit. It was the joke. PAYE, pay as you earn.
Completely parallel, but the engagement.
Yeah, and here it was, and the funding went to. I remember one project they funded was some guys trying to move a lump of stone from Wales to roughly in the area of Stonehenge to demonstrate how they'd moved this stone from Wales to Stonehenge. They got 5 miles. They didn't even get 5 miles before they quit, and they would be funded to the tune of £50,000. That was the sort of mad kind of millennium sort of arts funding, and I thought we were pretty cinched to get it, and we didn't. And so we just relied on getting, the actual hat, the bottling at the end. And some nights we got over £1,000, other nights we got £300, and in the end it made about, I don't know, it made a bit, and everybody, and I think I got £150 for doing it, and I'd been working on it for the whole thing. I'd been working on it a month beforehand. I'd worked on it the whole month that we were on it, and I got the same as everybody else. Everybody got about £150.
So Rob, why bother? Why bother?
Because it was a great thing to do. It's something street performers should do and can do, and it's great when you do these things. And they are the theatre shows.
The street performers should do it. Why do you think they should?
Because if you all get together, the strength of you guys is bigger than the sum of you guys is infinitely bigger. Have you never seen when you get like 4 or 5 performers all get together and suddenly they really knock out a really good show, rather than just doing their normal "I've got to earn my living" show?
I'll be honest, and this might be very disappointing for you to hear, but as
they don't do it.
I'd like to believe as a contemporary entertainer, they're kind of stories. We see the old guys. Like I'll go and watch. Fucking Gathemwe and Matt Bernard and Herbie. They do a show in Edinburgh as a group show, and think, isn't that amazing? How they're doing a group show together. Isn't that wonderful?
But
it's not common, mate. It's like that's amazing to do that once a year.
Okay, well, I mean, Matt Bernard did the Musketeers, Ben Langley Musketeers, Dave Evans Musketeer, were all the Musketeers, Mike Howe, and there were 10 of us doing it, 10 or 12 of us, and a couple of actors, because there was just a bit of acting needed doing. And the one person I didn't have was Richard Garrity. To my eternal shame, Richard Garrity did the world's worst audition, honest to God. There was an actress who he was auditioning against, and she went, all right, is he a good stage manager? Because he's a terrible actor, And it was just like, and poor old Richard Garrity is a perfectly good performer. I believe he's currently in Dumbo, working with, what's his name? So he's a really good actor, but on this event he was terrible, and I didn't put him in the cast. I probably should have done, because you just watch him doing a perform and you go, that's not what you want to perform. And that was always the trick of the trick of the theatre company. And if I was going to pass on any advice, is the skill you learn as a street performer, how to wrangle an audience, how to feel the energy of an audience, is the greatest skill you lose. You learn on Covent Garden, because you're in front of an audience all the time. All the best actors are in front of audiences all the time, and they just get fucking better and better and better. The reason why Ian McKellen is so good is because he spends fuckload of time in front of audiences, understanding energies, and street performers are there day in, day out, having to generate this in an audience. If you take that skill of knowing where the audience is and put it somewhere else, it's insanely effective. Ask Eddie Izzard, ask Stewie Goldsmith. If anybody who ever saw a performance theatre company show would go, yeah, anybody who ever saw a show I've directed would go, yeah, it's what he does is great, it's weird. Go on, sorry, you were saying.
Yeah, the thing I'm interested in is, I see street performance right now as kind of a dying medium in terms of creative practice.
Yeah.
And so when you say you watch street performers and you think that they have this ability to intuitively know what's happening in the audience, I kind of agree with you. But I think the medium has forced, sorry to just further clarify.
Yeah. No, that's okay.
Really like the point. I think the medium, as it's gone through time, has forced through cultural pressures, forced people not to experiment, and so people do intuitively know what a crowd is, and they avoid any drop of atmosphere at any cost. So things become flaming and fucking boring.
Whenever I sort of sneak through Covent Garden, I didn't for the best part of a decade. I didn't go near the place, and I do see a lot of generic stuff and a lot of very technical stuff. Whereby look, I'm a little bit responsible for that. It absolutely was my idea to split the pitch, split Covent Garden, to split the Piazza pitch. That was my idea.
So when you say split the pitch, I kind of know what you're saying, but please explain.
Oh, okay. Basically, on prime time at the weekend, from sort of 12 o'clock, I think, till something like about 3 or 4, all the shows in that, there would be 2 pitches running either side of the Piazza. And because I suggested that, and it was a way of solving the fact that lots of people were not getting shows, and everybody, so we went, okay, yeah, from 12 o'clock, it goes, you get one show start there, the other shows there, and then it carries on running concurrently either side. Because of that, people then started developing. That's really when the sound systems came in, when all the street performers started miking up and having loud sound systems. And, I don't want to name names, but there are people who I really go, you're a twat for doing that, and they would put on the really loud sound because they would absolutely want to steal the audience off the other show.
If I use this phrase, would make sense to you, noise magnet.
Yeah, absolutely. It's you put on a really loud sound system, you put on a pumping piece of music, you just have to stand there and people go, what is going on? Of course they do, And that is kind of okay in the context of a solo show, but this was about screwing over the other show, stealing the audience from the other show by just putting on such a loud noise that sometimes the people stand. I just worked with my voice the whole time. I never mic'd up, and the whole of that time, I didn't have a very.
Purpose? Was that?
Yeah, well, to be honest, No, that was just the way one did. You know, when I came, there were very few people who used mics. You know, some people use music, but they played it. You know, you had these little PV carry amps, and they weren't that loud.
Cans, little cans, the PV amp.
No, these were like a little mini, what's the name, practice amp. Size of a practice amp, but you could put batteries in them as well as plug them. They weren't chargeable.
Like just a bit larger than a lunchbox.
Yeah. And in the end, people were using car batteries to make them work. It was just that nobody, you know, sound really took a leap. You know, when Bose speakers came in, suddenly instead of having great big wardrobe-sized stacks, you've got these bloody Bose speakers which you can carry your whole sound system.
I began with an amp can, and an amp can would barely do 100 people.
Is that the little round?
You know. And then nowadays I've got a Bose, which is not much heavier than the amp can, that will do 500 people and more without worry.
Yeah. No, you've all technologically moved up, thing, and I don't.
Well, it wasn't us, but you know, the world moved up, and we bought into
it. Did. Well, if somebody's got a bloody great big carry amp next to you, then you know, you in some ways, you know, you are yelling into air, and you're getting shat on by them. So it's a sort of arms race, basically, isn't it?
Yes, very much. And did you have this feeling? Yeah. I mean, I have this feeling now.
The arms race is also you've got to be up high, you've got to be loud, and you've got to be big. You know.
Well, it's interesting you say this because we talk a lot on this show, and I talk with a couple of guys, really, because we're trying to understand the birth of hack is really, and the sort of the method of the pervasiveness of hack is something we look at a lot and think about a lot. Where does the generic Eric show on the street really come from?
Oh right, okay. So it's hack, as in you're just doing a hackneyed show, and it's
Well, the routine is I put on loud music, I fill out the props, I do the build, I do the routine in the middle, whatever it may be. Then someone puts me up in a high thing, I do a hat line, and I do the finale. Yeah. How did this, which seems to be pervasive now, almost to the point of suicide as a culture? Yeah. This structure, you know.
In its defence about the sort of hackneyed sort of the show, I would say 20s, 30s Chicago jazz. Basically, they were all doing the same bloody songs, but they were all doing them in their own way. Now, Bix Beiderbecke would be doing it really beautifully on with his oboes, well, not his oboe, with his clarinet, and Louis Armstrong would be doing Knocking It Out with Thing, and Muggsy Spaniel would be doing on trombone. And they would all be playing the same songs, and they would steal each other's songs, they would steal each other, and and it was like, who can hold the note the longest, and Bix Beiderbecke would hold the note longest, and they would have, and you'd hear that, well then, what's his name? And Fats Waller would be playing piano in certain ways, and people would nick the way he did that song and that song. And it was all this kind of generic stuff going round, and
I was amazed. They were street bands as well, those guys, weren't they? They played in the street in.
Well, they did in New Orleans. In New Orleans, they did. But by the time you got, when they took this is taking the midnight train from Georgia. You fucked off from racists, South America, Dixieland, because you were sick to death of seeing your mates being hung, and having apartheid basically. And you went to Chicago, and you were in jazz clubs, and there was a little bit more integration. The top places like Cotton Club was black performers, white audience. No, can't be a black person and go to the Cotton Club. And so that's why they went up north, because they were just getting away from the goddamn Klan, for Christ's sake. But they lent each other's materials, they used each other's styles, they did stuff, they copied stuff, and that's a bit like street performing, isn't it? Whereby it's almost like there's a jazz version of what you do, and you do a show and you do that, and you'll do that line and this line and some line, and some people.
Ironic, though, isn't it? Weirdly ironic. Jazz is supposed to be freeform, original, and street performance, particularly kind of the stuff we as an art form ape, is improv. It's original. It's made up in the spot.
Yeah, but we are also doing the same routines. With in as much that Muggsy Spaniel, Fats Waller, they all did Ain't Misbehaving. Every single one of them, right up to Kenny Ball and his jazz men, would be doing Ain't Misbehaving. They'd all do it differently, but they were all doing Ain't Misbehaving. Hoagie Carmichael wrote it, and I think. And and it's that somebody invented juggling fire some Egyptian invented juggling fire on the pyramids or something. That's why they built the pyramids, so he could get up high.
Well, the higher you are, the more money you make.
That's what it was. He says, "I want a really fucking big pyramid." That's it. And
I've got this massive pyramid, mate. I'm going to bring it to the next show. It's fucking massive.
What do you think the Eiffel Tower's for?
The edge I'll get with
the Eiffel
pyramid,
Tower. There was somebody on the Eiffel Tower going, and now I'm going to juggle fire, and then I'm going to stick this tower up my arm.
So tell me the Eiffel Tower was a kind of proto-pole show.
It was, exactly. And it's... I'm
gonna definitely drag us back to just at least my point on this. It seems like when you talk about the split pitching and the competition and the amps, that this competition is going to precipitated
the arms race.
Lack of room to be creative. Do you know what I mean?
Well, it precipitated. I think part of the thing was the money imperative. That people realized if you do this, do that, it makes a lot of money. There are performers who, really don't lack inventive talent, but they are good imitators and they are technically good at something, and they can do that and they can knock out a show. And I'm sure in their hearts they are convinced this is their original show and that it's an original thing, and it's just a little less original than, say, I don't know, Malcolm Hardy doing stuff or something. I don't know. I don't know I mean, like, Mike Howe is still working, and his show is always a bit fucking mad, isn't it? It's always kind of weird.
Well, he's in many different phases. When I first began, he was doing a Dad's Army show.
Yeah,
and I suspect that from the beginning of me doing shows in the year 2000-ish to now, Mike, the scene, the culture changed to the point where Dad's Army was no longer really in the common lexicon. So now he's doing the YMCA. And I imagine, like, maybe 5 years he'll be doing an 80s show,
When I first saw him, he was doing the Norman Conquest show, but I don't suppose that's known to people anymore.
The Norman Conquest went out in 1987,
nobody's doing that anymore. The old Eye in the Arrow routine, I do think it tends to reinvent itself. There will be a sort of weird, catalyst whereby, I swear to God that, I would be there going, it's very generic. A lot of the shows are generic in our day, And I mean, certainly I can remember having a word with Mark, his political stand-up comedian.
Rothman?
No. He's a comedian rather than
Mark Thomas.
Mark Thomas came down to Covent Garden with a partner, and they basically started doing my knife throwing routine. Sticking knives in somebody, and I sort of said to him, "That's my show. You're not doing that." And poor old Mark Thomas. Where is he now? I probably did him the greatest favour on earth that he didn't end up a street performer, that he ended up as Mark Thomas, political commentator and wonderful guy. I did it politely. I just said, that's my show you're doing,
Yeah, you allowed him to not live a life of doing someone else's words.
Yeah, but
you started doing that. You didn't start your career going out doing someone else's routine. You went out there playing.
Ironically enough, I didn't actually know I was doing somebody else's routine. Remember I said about escaping from a woolly jumper? And what had happened is this friend of mine had come down to Covent Garden, seen the Mendizes doing an escape from a woolly jumper, come back up to college in Sheffield. A couple of years later, we were looking for ideas to do stupid things in this music hall. And he said, escape from a woolly jumper. And I did this escape from a woolly jumper a couple of times, And then when we came down to Covent Garden, me and Eddie, it was like, well, what about doing that escape from the woolly jumper? We'll do the escape from the woolly jumper. Now, Chris Adams, who had obviously done that routine, must have gone, that's Mendizes escaping from a woolly jumper. Or he just went, somebody else had the idea. Now, I didn't know it was that until... I think Alex eventually said, "Oh no, they definitely used to do an escape from woolly jumper." And then I actually eventually went back to this friend of mine from college and said, the escape from woolly. Oh, I saw these guys doing it on Covent Garden, and you go, "Oh, I see, right." So it's that kind of weird. And that's what I mean about, Rob, that's a jazz analogy, that some things go around and you don't necessarily, not all plagiarism is, I'm stealing this line. Some of it fucking is. Believe you me, there are people out there who are shameless and, outrageous in what they pinch. I mean, I can remember watching a Freddie Starr comedy special, and he had undoubtedly had one of his researchers come down to Covent Garden, because they literally did a Pepe mime routine about getting in a car and did Pepe's gags about putting, and things. And you specifically saw thing, and he finished with my knife throwing show.
Wow. I mean, I've heard Brian Reed tell this. He said it was very common that particularly Saturday night television.
Yeah.
Would kind of use a terrible word for this, but kind of rape Covent Garden for material.
Well, TV is gobbling up stuff. This is why Eddie just went, I'm not doing television. I don't do television. And it drove them fucking mad, honest to God. I seriously experienced a TV producer sort of going apeshit about the idea that Eddie Izzard is refusing to do television, because nobody had ever refused to do television before. And they do. They're voracious. They need material constantly, and that's why things like.
Do you think is this writers that are kind of desperate to cut their teeth, sitting in the balconies, taking notes, or is it a protracted kind of thing of if you want to get something, go down Covent Garden to get it, or
it's ain't misbehaving, isn't it? It's like, I heard this really good song in this club played by this black guy, and it's a really good song. I think we could do it. Because why? Because we're not in the same city as he is. So a researcher comes down, sees a routine, or something on Covent Garden. I don't think they do it deliberately. They just go, oh, there's this routine. I saw this really funny routine where somebody climbed up a pole and then, climbed on somebody and then juggled on, climbed on somebody's shoulders and then juggled on their shoulders, could you do that? And well, I'd have to learn to juggle, But
there's such a weird idea of lack of ownership with that they say, oh, we saw this really good idea of this guy doing this, and no one goes, well, we should go to that guy and ask him, can we use this?
Yeah, you should. You really should. But you're television, and you are possibly an intern who is a researcher on some sort of Saturday show or something like that, and you're desperate, and so you go, I'm gonna put that in the room, and there's this, what about this routine? But I would also argue, what was I
so the room is like producers, directors, kind of TV people.
Yeah, I in as much, it is odd when you see, I don't necessarily think my show's original. Somebody once, when I started doing the knife throwing and having people stick knives in, next to the guy with a blindfold on, somebody said, you're doing, I've forgotten his name now, but he used to do a thing with balloons where everyone thought, the guy thought they blindfolded the member of the audience and there were balloons, and he just stuck a pin in the balloons, and the guy thought that he was having knives thrown at him. And in actual fact, the whole time he was using a stooge, so it wasn't a real member of the public; it was always a stooge, and they were they were acting the reaction. And somebody said, "Oh, you're doing what's his name's routine?" And believe you me, there is nothing new under the sun. You are always, it's quite freaky. You will find, if you come up with what you think is your own brilliant idea, somewhere along the line, there's some Victorian, vaudeville music hall act came up with that idea before. It really is.
Not even just that. I've looked at what is, in my opinion, probably one of the best clowns in the world, and I won't mention his name because I mentioned him many times before, but I've sat and studied him because when I watched his show for the first time, it was one of those shows where it made me want to give up.
Yeah, when you see something so good, you go, "Oh God, I'm really."
Yes.
I have that.
And I spent a couple of years watching it, and I started seeing the things like, "Oh, well, this came from here. This came from here."
Oh,
and literally, I became very friends with this person, and I could ask them. And majority of the time, I wasn't far off seeing the lineage of the progression of ideas. So there's no doubt that there's an element of the Picasso quote.
Yeah,
bad artist hero.
I think it's totally. there's I quote a lot. There's a definition by Freud that genius is just the putting together of two ideas that haven't been put together before. And there is, I think there's a lot of that there are things that inspire you. There, I don't know. I sometimes forget if I've said this to you privately, haven't I? About Shelley's poem "Ode to a Greek Urn." I think it's Shelley. And it's the fact that, here's an old Greek pot and he writes a poem about it. Now, the old Greek pot is obviously demolished, smashed, and was probably never much of a Greek pot in the first place. But Shelley's poem is there, inspired by this. And, best of all is, is that, that Greek urn has inspired, Eric Morecambe to say, what's the Greek urn? About $5 a week, and it's not like
it's the conversation we're having now.
Yeah, indeed, and it's people take stuff. There's nothing new under the sun, and Shakespeare borrowed every plot he ever used, or it was his history or the history of Britain, and every plot he ever used was something he filched. But nonetheless, believe you me, I have occasionally researched the original, and they ain't fucking Shakespeare. I tell you, they're awful sometimes. He has done something stunning with them at times. Sometimes they're shit, but and that's the difference. Somebody getting on a high unicycle juggling a chainsaw, is that. And then there's sometimes, and lots of people will do that. It's the average Joe public goes, what? And to you and I, we go, yeah, people do that. But actually, to go back to Richie Rich, there is something about the guy, and he knocks it out of the park. Brian Reed to us does these tiny shows which the audience doesn't really get. We love him dearly, and who would you rather watch? A really good act that the audience is loving, or would you rather watch the quirky, the odd, the weird, the human? Really,
is that how performers perform?
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes, sometimes performers is because they are so inexplicably bad that you just, honest to God, there used to be about 10 of us would watch these two French women. John Feely will remember it, and Paddy might remember it. I can't remember. French Connection. They were called French Connection. And they were the most inexplicable show. None of us ever understood what the fuck the show was about. There were these two French women. They were very nice, and we were very friendly to them, and there was nothing, but their show was just inexplicable, and it would involve.
Because it was like absurd, it was surreal, it was farcical.
It was just fucking barking mad. But honest to God, we would watch it every time it was on because we just couldn't get it. There was one of the women would be going, "Hello, I want a baby," and she'd be going up to men going, "Would you like to help me with that? Make a baby?" And it was just, they're not. And somewhere along the line, I don't know, she would end up with a small doll, having sort of got closer to a member of the audience than I thought was suitable, sort of thing. And I'm an aggressive street performer. And then from nowhere,
she's copulation in some way.
Yes, and then from nowhere, from round the pillar, suddenly the other one would arrive in this huge fucking stork costume. It was massive on stilts. And they were about 8-foot stilts, and she's there wobbling along with this huge fucking stork head going, "Oh, and here is my baby." And it made no fucking sense whatsoever. None of us ever got it, but absolutely all of us would sit there watching the show, laughing our nuts off every time it was on. And I do remember.
Was that the joy of trying to figure out understanding the medium?
It was just, it's when you see something and you really think it's terrible, and I remember an act called Volcano, and we all thought he was one of the world's worst street performers, and he's a nice enough sort of, all right, okay, yeah, I'll walk on glass, I'll blow fire, and something. And he would do this whole sort of story about, the tasks of Hercules or something. And we would watch him because he was so terrible. And he would actually do all right. And then there was also a guy who tragically died called Hennessy. I've actually used his name as a character in one of my novels subsequently. and me and John Hennessy, he slightly tragically died, and you know, and he just should never have been a street performer, because you know, oddly enough, when he died, it was discovered he had about 2 houses. I think he ended up owning about 3 or 4 houses around London. He was like a millionaire, and he would still come down bloody doing Covent Garden street performing, because I like to street performing, and he only had 1 vocal cord or something, and he was like, "Oh no, I'm going to do a show." He had no neck whatsoever, and he was, "I'm going to do a show." Oh, hey, oh, and John Hennessy. Yeah, I don't know.
Concrete John, I believe, is what Paddy phrased it.
Yes, Concrete John, you're right. And that was his facial expressions he's referring to. Concrete John. His face never changed from start to finish. And he kind of, I mean, there were times when I'd earnestly sit with him and say, "Honestly, why are you doing Covent Garden?" You know, "I like doing Covent Garden. I really enjoy performing. I think my show's getting better and better all the time. It really is." You know, and I'd be there going, and you know, and he would explain that, you know, "Oh well, I'm sorry, I've just bought another house, so I've now got 4, and I'm renting them out, and so you know," and I'm there going, "What the fuck are you doing?" You know, look, most of us need this to pay the mortgages, or to, you know, for our children to go to college and things, which is what, you know, one of the reasons I went into education was I had 3 daughters, and you know, they were coming up to the age where they would all need to go to university or have the option to. And I really
3 large dowries to pay there.
Sorry?
Yeah, 3 large dowries to pay.
Well, you know, you get kids and you kind of go, right, well, the money is key, and the German theatre directing was paying insanely well, and I screwed that up in a very personal way, not in any kind of professional way, but I screwed it up in a personal way, and I was in a strong danger of my marriage completely falling apart, because, you know, I was out directing shows in Germany for 6 weeks at a time, you know, because they rehearse everything for 6 weeks at least, whereas in Britain you're lucky to get 3. And I was getting, you know, I was getting £24,000 a show.
Wow.
Yeah, they really pay. You know, so it was kind of 24,000 euros was my thing, and
I've been told by other sources that you are much loved in Germany. In Germany, you are a
yes,
celebrated character.
I mean, it's for all sorts of weird fucking reasons. One is they are extremely classically trained. They really aren't trained to be improvisational. They are the birthplace of naturalism. Nearly all their theatre is locked down naturalism, and they do it brilliantly, and they do it relentlessly. They do a lot of it, and it's, you know, it's massively publicly subsidised. I mean, they subsidise theatre in the same way that we subsidise the NHS. Seriously, the first thing they rebuilt after the war was the theatres, and they, you know, if you're an actor in Germany and you audition for a theatre, you are put on a year's contract, and you know, you are, you know, next time you'll get a 2-year contract, and you are just put in different plays. And they have an ensemble. Every theatre will have an ensemble of 30-odd actors who just fill out all the plays and whatever play they do, you know. And so when you're booked to do a direction there, you know, you pick the actors from their ensemble and you work with their actors, you know, in German. And they had done very little sort of improvisationally comedy stuff. So I was wheeled in, you know, the first thing I directed was my play, which was the Ben-Hur one, which is very audience participation, the place and play, and a lot of it is about the fact that you admit that you're actors. In the actual script, it says, you know, that you explain to the audience that this guy was the director usually, but now this guy's taken over because there was a vote when he was out the room, and that as a result, people are always arguing between each other. You know, well, it's very much like, you know, the play What Went Wrong stuff, But we,
Rob, I'm really sorry. I do have to say this. In 11 minutes, we have a limit on this program of doing 4-hour interviews.
I think it's the only way to.
We will, no matter what I desire, be cut off.
I think it's the best thing to do. It's it's the only way to shut the fucker up, really.
Well, I'm more than happy to have you back on again because I think there's so many things we haven't touched on. I'm very pleased with the fact that we spent 4 hours talking, and I feel like there's so much more that we can talk about. But in the last 10 minutes,
my advice to street performers would be take that ineffable skill that you have of audience wrangling and take it somewhere else. Because much as I dearly love the format, it's a bit of a cruel fucker the older you get. I don't know. It's a bit of a young person's game. In my head, I honestly don't know. I really don't. And I don't know. There seem to be a lot of casualties. There's an awful lot in I remember at one point thinking, well, there's been about 50 odd people in the sum, in about the 15 years I've known, about 50 odd performers, roughly, in and out, varying times. And of those, I would say half were substance addicted, either alcoholic or drug addicted. Most were not in a very financially reliable position. And I seem to remember 3 of them had committed suicide. Now, if you took 50 average people, anywhere, the idea of having, what's the percentage? 3 out of 50 is 6% of people committing suicide would be insanely high. If 6% of people committed suicide in any group, there would be something very odd going on. And I think that demonstrates something about street performing. Take the skills, take them somewhere else, because they're devastating when you take them somewhere else. Honest to God, theatrically, the reason why they like me in Germany and we did well, we used to sell out a lot of shows, theatre shows, is because, that energy, take that energy into the theatre and people go, oh my God, wow. It's increasingly happening anyway, so the play What Went Wrong, Complete Works of Shakespeare, they were a bunch of street performers from America, and they used to do the Renaissance fairs doing Shakespeare mistakes, and then slowly they put a show together, and they did Edinburgh, and then they went down to the West End. And Adam Long's the main guy. He's the only one who's still in it from the original.
I did not know that. Thank you, Rob. I will certainly be reaching out to them at a later time. So your big thing is like achieve the skills in the street, use your stage time, use the ability to understand crowds and human beings the way they respond, and then take it into a different stage, the theatre.
Yeah, stand up. It seems to work a treat. Stewie Goldsmith, I believe, Windsor at one point was doing stand up. I really don't know if he's still doing it. Lots of them doing
still comparing.
Yeah, still comparing. I honestly don't know. And certainly, it hasn't hurt Eddie Izzard. He's done quite well with it, quite frankly, and even in acting, it's really quite an interesting, the first professional piece of acting I got Paddy doing, where he was just doing straight acting, was in a thing called the Guy Burgess trilogy. Now, the toughest critic in Britain at the time, and is still, was a guy called Nicolas de Jong. He's now the critic of the Evening Standard. At the time, he was the critic, and he was the main critic of The Guardian. He came to see Paddy Bramwell's in the first straight piece of acting he ever did. And his description of Patrick Bramwell's and this other actor is, and the acting by Patrick Bramwell's and Paul Aves is superlative. Now, Paddy was not an actor. He's a performer, and he was singing, and, it's absolutely that energy. He just knew where the fucking audience was every night, and you use that in straight acting, and it's even stronger. Eddie's a really good straight actor, and I do think it's something to do with the knowing where the audience is, even in film. God knows what happens in film. I don't know, but
But is it knowing how the pantomime functions? Is that the thing?
Yeah, it is that. You get people who just... there's a guy who is stunning panto dame down at Hackney Empire who most people will know from Tracy Beaker. I've forgotten his name. Wonderful performer, like a very large black guy, and he's been the panto dame at Hackney Empire. He's a national treasure. He's stunning, and he has the audience in the palm of his hands. I also saw him in Guys and Dolls at the National Theatre, where when he sang a song, he got 5 standing ovations for that song. They had to just go, fuck it, will you just sit down? We've got to get on with the show. Because he just sang this, just stunning. And, and there is something about that, performance ability. Steve Martin was an old street performer. He'd done
a great fucking
Robin Williams had done street performing. They all have that kind of weird energy, and that something about it. It's a very important sixth sense and skill, and it's great in street performing. I think it's crucial in street performing. I'm just personally, fair play to everybody else who does, and I do every now and then. I'm there, go, just when I think I'm out, they're gonna drag me back in to street performing, and it is lovely. Street performing is great. It is personally, I believe, the one socialist form of entertainment. It needs no, it's great for that, and I love it dearly as a medium. And as a personal performer, I think gather these skills while you're young, take them into somewhere else, and I think they will work well for you. Would be my,
Rob,
catechism.
Rob, what a lovely way to end. I mean, we could ramble on for the next 5 minutes.
No.
If you have things you'd like to say,
I would say, Matthew, I don't know. Congratulations on doing this. It's anybody putting together something is an achievement. The one thing street performers are great at is not putting stuff together, and you've actually managed to put this together. And I actually do think it's quite a valuable piece of social history, in the same way that interviewing people about how they were during the war was an important piece of social history. So I congratulate you. Well done, Matt, honestly. And I've enjoyed the others.
Well, I think it's an interesting thing. I think it's an interesting thing that happens with buskers is that if we get big, and your friend Eddie is the exception to this, which will be quite interesting. Hopefully, maybe one day I get to speak to him. Is that he did believe, which is this period of looking back. But most of the time, what you'll find through exceptionalism is that when people become big, they're telling people, "You must come and see me because I'm special." And so when they go back to the pitch and show the 100 people who created that specialness, they tend to. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I to be honest, I don't know that many people who are big, really. To be, in all honesty, whenever I chat to Ed, he's always talking about sort of the street performing stuff and what's the name stuff, and I'm there going, you wouldn't like to tell me about Brad Pitt and and Hollywood gossip stuff, and he's very scantly goes, well, all right, yeah, we were walking out of a hotel once, and everyone was looking at Brad Pitt. And he's walking with, who are the other guys in those, the other 2 big stars of it? Oh, George Clooney, Brad Pitt, and what's the other one? Matt Damon. They are walking out of a hotel together with Eddie. And what Eddie realizes is that nobody is looking at Clooney, Matt Damon, or Eddie. Everyone is looking at Brad fucking Pitt. He is that impressive. And that's one of the few bits of gossip the man has ever told me. And I'm thinking, tell me about that. That's great. I love that.
Well, I quite enjoy the idea that you talk with each other, that you're trying to get the gossip.
Yeah.
You're trying to get the gossip, and he's trying to reach back to the old street days. I like the idea.
He's always there going, but remember that time, when we used to do that thing with the show, and we'd do that. Yeah, well, when we did that, and it was just like, I remember that bit. God, tell me something I don't know, Mr. Izzard.
Well, Rob, I'll say it's now with precious few minutes left of our 4 hours, and we don't have the
our mere 4 hours.
The internet will cut us off. It's hard, like
rightly so.
Genuinely fascinating. I've had such a pleasure over these last 4 hours talking to you, as I have talked to you before. Thank you so much.
Legendary, I feel. I'm moving that one. Okay, really, I've enjoyed talking.
And I'm checking the clocks. I have time. When I was learning and beginning, I did a couple of years at South Bank, and then eventually A couple of people came and spotted me and said, "You're good enough to go to Covent Garden." And I went there, and when I was learning there, the stories that were told of people like yourself, your stories were the stories that people told me when I was young and learning.
Yeah,
that's what I think of as a legend. You know, I knew you before I talked to you because of those stories.
Okay. Yeah, but people always told the stories about me were always the terrible stories. You know, I go,
some are terrible, some are great. You know, you don't get to decide your legend, but it's a legend.
Exactly. You know, that's yes. As Charles Manson once said, you don't get to decide your legend. You know, and all people are going, I wanted to decide my legend. I don't know why I killed all those people.
So, Rob, we have 1 minute left. You've got a minute. Last minute you want to say to people?
No, other than I congratulate you on this. I think it is a very good medium, and it's nice to gather up a welter of experience from all these different people. I think that's great. I really do think that's important, because otherwise, I don't know. Take care, man.
Well, I certainly hope that the clock's turning. We're going to be cut off any second. I certainly hope the people in the future will be able to enjoy this. Rob, thank you so much. Everyone who's been watching, thank you for watching. Thank you, all of you. Particularly the people I know, thank you for watching and commenting. It's been so nice to know you guys were here. Rob, you want to say goodbye?
Yep. Take care. Cheerio. Thank you very much.
Cool. Goodbye, everybody. Please stay on the line, bro. I'll chat you in 2 seconds. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye.
No idea